Slashes, huh? What's your favorite scary movie?
Not that one.
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking Because You Wanted to Know. We're talking MC Escher Hell. And we're talking Evil Queen Julia fucking Cotton. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace. And we're talking I'm Cold.
Aww.
It's such a funny line.
It's a great line in a great fucking movie.
Great fucking movie. Everyone, it's taken us 4 fucking years to get here, but we are finally discussing the final one we're covering, theatrically released Hellraiser film in Hellbound Hellraiser II.
A Trace personal favorite, obviously a favorite of mine because, as I said, Julia fucking Cotton.
I'm telling you, it was so wild going, because, making my notes for this, I was like, okay, wait, what did I say in Hellraiser 3? What did I say in Hellraiser 4? What did I say? Mm-hmm. I don't know why we did them in this order, but we did.
Yeah, obviously we're doing this one because it is the 35th anniversary. We missed it by a couple of weeks, but we decided to wait for a new year. So, hello, Trace. Welcome back to our 6th year of Horror Queers.
Happy 2024, everybody.
Oh, boy. Yeah. You know what? We originally had this on the schedule as our last episode of last year, but we decided to wait because no one listens to podcasts between Christmas and New Year's, and we wanted to make sure everyone listened to this one because this is a movie that is well worth your time.
Amen to that. I would also argue it's the most, upsetting of these movies, at least in terms of the violence. There is a scene in this movie, and I'm pretty sure you can guess what it is.
Yeah.
To this day, I still have trouble, watching. I feel my head, automatically turns away during that scene.
Get them off me!
I cannot. But, okay, before we get too much further into this love fest, let's bring in our guest, who, honestly, at this point, shouldn't be a surprise who this is. But everyone, he is a horror journalist with bylines at Daily Dead, Rue Morgue, and Cinepunks. He is the co-host of The Corpse Club, the official podcast of Daily Dead that does deep dives into the world of horror entertainment. And you may also remember him from our episodes on Hellraiser 1, the original, and Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. Please welcome back Bryan Christopher.
And to think, I hesitated.
Oh, Chenard. I will have such things to say about this character, but hello, Bryan. Welcome back.
Howdy, gents. Happy New Year.
How is your love? How is your Hellraiser 2 love going today?
Ooh, this is definitely one that bounces around for me. There are times where I like it just as much as the first one. There are times where it dips down a little bit. There's never a time where I don't really, really like it. There's just times where maybe it's not on the same level as the first one for me. I would say after watching this past round on the beautiful Quartet of Torment Blu-ray, I would say it's pretty close to the first
back up
one.
There, right?
Yeah, and such a good compliment. And they also use the full version. I don't know if you would call it the unrated, but I definitely know that the version I had for a long time was left out of a couple of key small moments that this new version has that I do think makes it better.
And those things were cut to get the R rating, but as far as I could tell, every version, I have 3 copies of this movie. Because one is from that Quartet of Torment, one is from the Scarlet Box, and I think I have an old DVD somewhere. But I think the Blu-rays were definitely, this unrated cut, but the DVD might have been the R-rated cut.
I think so, yeah.
I will say, though, this is a 5-star film for me. This is my favorite entry in the Hellraiser franchise. Granted, watching it yesterday was the first time I watched it critically, and there are
There's
definitely
issues. Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's a runtime thing, because this movie is only, quote-unquote, 95 minutes long, and I feel like there's so much stuff in here that you could easily fill an extra 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah. I'm probably going to sound like a broken record. I'm going to want more Julia. I'm going to want a little bit less Chenard. I'm wishing that he was less like a Freddy Krueger knockoff. But overall, this movie is just so packed to the gills with interesting ideas. The gore is outstanding. The fact that Clive Barker is involved, but not really in one of those key roles, is kind of shocking to me because this feels like it captures the flavor so well.
I do appreciate that. I feel like Tony Randel, who took over directing duties on this, he does give it his own flair too. He's not, it's a little bit more, I think, operatic than the first one.
I mean, the score, like, it is so big in this movie.
Which I think absolutely fits, given that they are really kind of expanding the mythology in this one, too.
Well, it's a different focus, too, right? Like, whereas the first one is very much like a sex movie, this one doesn't have a lot of that. but
How
it's not...
dare you?
Famous sex movie, Hellraiser.
Do not slap that on the poster. How dare you?
Good sex movie. 4 stars.
4 stars. Oh my God.
The worst part is, like,
I can't deal with this.
I know what he's saying. Like, I get exactly what he means. Like, as the Hellraiser franchise goes on, they really move away from this as like a metaphor for kink and for queer sexuality. But the first one's a sex movie.
Wait, so if the first one is a sex movie, what does that make this one then? The Hell movie?
It's actually, well, it's a movie about obsession, according to screenwriter Peter Atkins. But yeah, sorry, my point being was just that this movie isn't trying to be a sex movie or a movie about sex.
Right. That is fair. Okay, I will allow it.
Anyway, okay. Well, shocker, because this Quartet of Torment comes with not only a book on these movies, but plenty of special features. So I've got a fun production history for us.
Okay.
So, as we discussed, and everyone, I would recommend going back and listening to our first Hellraiser episode, because there's a lot of really good backstory in that will tie into this production that I'm not going to repeat.
Which I think lends itself to why you like this film even more than the first one, because it quite literally, it's almost less of a sequel and more of just a continuation. Like, you could watch 1 and 2 as a single film and have an absolutely fantastic experience.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's not called Hellraiser Part 2, but I guess they included Hellbound to, like, connect it more to the novella, The Hellbound Heart, right?
Right, yeah.
But anyway, so the first Hellraiser was a big success for Clive Barker and New World Pictures, earning over $14 million on a $1 million budget, and it got a mostly positive critical reception. I didn't realize these stats, but it was the most successful foreign film released in 1987 in Hong Kong, Spain, and Australia. It broke box office records in Europe, particularly France, where it was a #1 film.
Anticipating new French extremity, I guess.
I was going to say, just give it 10 more years. And, Stephen King called Clive Barker the future of horror. The usual.
Tabitha, what do we think of Clive Barker?
I was waiting for it. But a sequel was inevitable, and I'm not sure... I don't know if people were expecting it a year later, because this movie comes out 15 months after the release of the original film.
Which is usually such a bad sign, because like when you see other franchises do that, Nightmare on Elm Street, I'm looking squarely in your direction.
Wow.
When they do that thing within like a year, between 4 and 5, I think was a year, and you just see the quality. I like 5, Nightmare 5 for kind of what it is, but it's you don't dodgy. Often see something where it's like, oh, we got to jump on, like, we got to strike while the iron is hot and get this out as quickly as possible just to make sure everybody's still thinking about it. That usually doesn't pan out well. So the fact that this does is kind of a miracle.
The other bad example of that, I would argue, is Child's Play 3, which came out 9 months after Child's Play 2.
It's just hard, right? Like, unless you literally have it all ready to go because you knew it was going to be a success, it's just tough to write a screenplay, get that shot, and get it cast and all the other technical stuff. It's not always the best decision.
Well, I don't know what y'all knew about this, but so Hellraiser 1 comes out in September of 87. But it did have a screening at Cannes in May of 87, and they officially greenlit the sequel the day after it screened at Cannes. So before, months before the first movie even came out, New World was like, yep, we're doing a sequel on that.
Interesting. Okay.
But here's the thing. So just before production began on the first film, Barker wrote 2 new scenes in Hellraiser's screenplay to make the opening more intense, which involves Frank purchasing the box and then opening it by himself in the attic. So I assume then the original script just started with, hey, we're meeting, Larry and Julia and Kirsty.
Which is kind of interesting in the context of, like, in the Hellbound Heart, they do have the opening scene with Frank. So it's interesting that they were going to cut that out in the original adaptation.
I wonder if it was going to be like you don't know where this movie is going, right? Because the first scene you have chains get him and you're like, whoa, shit, okay, this is what I'm in for. Whereas if you cut that out,
right,
you don't know what's going to happen.
You're leading with melodrama.
Mm-hmm. But the ending also with, going back to the merchant saying, what's your pleasure, sir? Like that was also the third edition as, and he wrote in his script next to it, bid for sequel next to that scene.
I mean, you can't say that Clive Barker was never thinking about the business side of show business. Like you see that in the Nightbreed movies. Like he's definitely trying to set up like a whole franchise with that. So it's not terribly surprising. It's just also pretty wild to think that not just the small turnaround time between 1 and 2, but just going from the novella to having 2 movies out is at the course of about 2 years. Because if I remember correctly, I think Hellbound Heart came out in 86. So by 2 years later, he's got 2 movies put out from that origin story.
Yeah, and to be clear though, that novella was always meant to be turned into a screenplay. So he was pulling like a 2 birds, 1 stone, where it's like, oh, I'm going to write this novella, but also write the script at the same time.
Yeah, it's a William Peter Blatty situation with The Exorcist, right? Where it's like, I'm doing this novel, but also secretly want to turn it into a film. But also, you know what? Get yours. I love this idea of Clive Barker saying, oh, I'm going to get me that Hollywood fucking coin.
Well, and the intention was to have him direct the film, but unfortunately at this time, and because of, we have that window of time for a sequel, so like we can't wait for him. But he had responsibilities to his publisher to deliver a new novel, meaning he had already spent his advance that they had given him for it. He couldn't make the time to direct the sequel. This book, by the way, was 1990's The Great and Secret Show, which Barker has gone on to say was the hardest to write of all of his books.
He's like, I wanted to make Hellraiser 2 when I had to make that.
Well, and he was also finishing up his work on the novella Cabal, which would, of course, later be turned into the film Nightbreed. And he was also working on a script for what he thought was going to be his next film, Harry D'Amour, the first adventure, which would, of course, later become Lord of Illusions, his last directorial effort. Yeah, so all that, he didn't have time to direct this shit. Or write the script.
He's got too many fingers and too many pies.
Basically. Sounds like you, Joe.
Shut up. Ooh, where's my movie deal?
Yeah! But he did have a very strong creative involvement in the film, including writing a full story outline for whichever screenwriter they brought on. And that screenwriter was Peter Atkins. And this man, he was handpicked by Barker because he liked a lot of the fiction he had written, but he was also a member of Dog Company, Barker's theater troupe from, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s, probably.
Okay.
So he hires Peter Atkins in July of 87. And again, this is 2 months before the first film even comes out.
So ambitious.
This would be Atkins' first screenplay, but funnily enough, the press kit for Hellraiser 2 also says that he's already working on an adaptation of Clive Barker's novella Cabal. Whoops, that didn't... Well, I mean, he didn't end up writing it, I don't think.
No.
I think Barker wrote that.
But fascinating. I mean, like so much of Hollywood history, right? It's what could have been if people had have gotten the thing that they were planning to do. I love the secret roads, right? Like what happens if Clive Barker does make Lord of Illusions before he makes Nightbreed? Does it make it a success? We'll never know.
Does it change the path of his career drastically to where he doesn't quit Hollywood? I don't know, maybe.
Literally. The thoughts.
I will say it is interesting though, because in this book on this Quartet of Torment set, they come with a press kit, which is from 1988, but then they have like an article on the production, which I would imagine was written more recently. But in that press kit, they're talking about how, this is not the end of the Hellraiser universe. We want to make it a trilogy. And they keep talking about how Julia's story is not resolved by the end of 2, and she will have, quote unquote, very much more to do in the third one.
You're breaking our hearts.
That just makes me so sad.
And everyone go back and listen to our Hellraiser 3 episode, because that didn't happen because Clare Higgins declined to come back and reprise her role.
My queen, she breaks my heart.
It sucks. Which maybe that's why too she has a bit of a smaller part, because it's like, hey, we're gonna deal with Channard here. We'll bring Julia back in the last one for the big moment and
the big finale, the capper of the trilogy.
Doesn't it make you like? I mean, we both. Brian, did you like the Hellraiser reboot from last year?
I liked it for what it was. It wasn't quite
what
my
a political
thing.
answer.
But it was, I will fully admit it wasn't my thing, but I do like what it was doing for people to give them a different entry point into that mythos.
I think it's an easier entry point than most of the films in the original franchise.
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying, but like even hearing this about Julia, I'm like, oh God, like honestly, just remake these first two movies so we can then get the intended third movie. I would love just for that to happen.
Oh my God, Trace, I love it. Folks, if you did not listen to our special bonus crossover episode with Such Sights to Show, the Clyde Barker podcast that Brian and I do on the Anatomy of a Scream Pod Squad, when we talked about the Hellraiser Bloodline work print, that's basically all Trace said. He was like, let's just remake these movies. Just remake the fourth one, give it a bigger budget, but also remake the first three films together.
Because you can't just go back and film Hellraiser Bloodline without being like, I mean, I guess you could, but no one's going to go back and watch the original. I mean, well, obviously we will, but like normal audience members won't do that.
Sure.
Yeah, but if we're remaking Hellraiser Bloodline, who are we doing it for if not ourselves?
Yeah. Well, and I think the reality is, and Brian, you have said this numerous times on Such Sights to Show, the reality is that Hellraiser is not a popular, like, 4-quadrant property. Like, This was always going to be niche because it is too weird. It's too sexy. So I think sometimes I just need that reminder where I look at this and I see so many opportunities for storytelling, for characters, for, yes, bringing fucking Julia Cotton back because she's right there. But the reality is that most people, and even I think most horror fans, probably look at this title and say, yeah, whatever, it's the guy with the pins.
And like, I don't think only you need a reminder for that. I think the people making these movies need that reminder because that's what you see them trying to do time and time again, is to turn this into more of a mainstream property. And honestly, I think some of my quibbles, and we'll probably get into it as we get into the movie itself, like about this one is you're just starting to get into like the realm of they're trying to make a horror icon out of Pinhead. Like, I think they can see what they've got here and they want to lean into that more, but it's at least, it's nowhere near as goofy as it gets with 3 and 4.
Right.
And then don't get me
started.
I mean,
there's some funny parts in this movie, but I mean, again, most of this movie I just find supremely upsetting.
But in the right ways.
Oh,
right?
And the way it's intended, absolutely. But like, there are some images in this movie that I'm just like, I don't think I've seen in the 35 years since its release, especially not in mainstream horror cinema.
No. And I mean, I reference Escher. I'm sure Trace, we will get to him. If not, we'll get to it in the plot. But it is one of those things where you're right, Brian. I think this film feels like it's taking the baton from the original one, but it's really expanding that mythology in such exciting ways. And I think that's why I end up liking 2 so much. You know, 1 is my ride or die, but 2 feels like, oh, this is where we could be taking it. And then it stalls out. And I don't know if that's just because we couldn't get Clare Higgins back and there was a story we were going to tell that we will just never get.
Well, and that's the thing, you know, I don't think there's necessarily any dropped threads by the time this movie ends, but there are hints at where you could take this in the next installment that aren't fully developed in this film, to where I'm like, well, I wonder if that was the plan. Like, are these things that aren't developed in this film are they not developed because they plan on developing them in the climax, the final trilogy entry?
That definitely puts Julia's resolution in this one in a different context of like, once again, it's kind of like that you don't see the body situation.
Yeah.
I mean, you see it flying away, but like you don't, they're definitely leaving, like if they were going to do this big third capstone to the Julia Cotton arc trilogy, they left themselves a big opportunity to do that.
Well,
100%.
I will say this. So in reading this press kit for Hellraiser 2, it very much says, we're going to move this forward with Julia. However, I went back and looked at my notes for Hellraiser 3, which were also pulled from the book in the Scarlet box set. Okay. And in that one, though, it says, they intended to do Julia in the third movie, but when Clare Higgins pulled out, they killed her off in later drafts of Hellraiser 2. So that makes it sound like, okay, cool, they knew that going into this one, so they rewrote it to kill her off. But then in the press kit for 2, it doesn't sound like they did that. It sounds like they were still planning on using her.
Right. But I think, Brian, your point still stands, right? The end of the Julia character in this film is open-ended enough that if we wanted to, we could very easily bring her back in a third film. Or you say, oh yeah, she got sucked into the vortex in hell. She's gone. Never mind.
Funnily enough, Clare Higgins said that was the most difficult scene to do because she had to like look scary and imposing while just having like a wind tunnel blown in her face.
It's a very America's Next Top Model challenge, right? Like smize with your eyes, but also you're getting sucked into hell.
But, okay, so Peter Atkins holds him up in Barker's London flat, and they both got drunk together and plotted the whole movie in a night. They presented the story to New World, which they approved, and then sent Atkins off to write the screenplay over the course of 3 weeks. They asked him to do it in 2. He said, no, this is my first screenplay. I can do it in 3. He'd also never written a script before, so he had to pull the script from the first movie to see how you actually like format and write a script.
I mean, which is wild because it kind of mirrors like Barker in the first one going to the local library and getting a book about directing because he didn't know the technical, like any of the technical aspects of it.
Exactly. And so, I mean, the fact that this man got this script, I mean, so he finishes the first draft about a month before the first film gets released. So August of 87. He turns in his second draft in mid-October, early November. So, by that point, like it was like, oh, cool. We have a $14 million box office hit. Let's go. And, they're having some complaints about the film lacking the sex component of the first film. So, as I said, it's not a sex movie. But that was always the plan. Barker said that where the first film had exploited the search for ever greater sexual and sensual experience, the sequel would exploit the desires for knowledge, for revenge, for reunion, and for the establishment of order. Whereas the makeup designer Jeff Portis just says, oh yeah, the first film's a modern gothic horror movie and this is a chase movie.
You know what? Both are accurate.
And I wonder to what degree Barker and company didn't want to have the argument with the studio about, well, you can have 3 thrusts, but not 2.
Oh my God.
That maybe. Replacing Barker in the director's chair was Tony Randel and his directorial debut. And if you remember, this was the guy that the New World Pictures studio had sent to the first film's production 3 weeks into it. He was, I think his official title was just studio representative to make sure, hey, first-time filmmaker / screenwriter, like, follow our budget, do it right, make this marketable. But he didn't have, like, as bad of a role as what you would think. Like, he and Barker had a really nice rapport with each other, and they wound up working together. And, again, go back and listen to that Hellraiser episode, but Randel's the reason we got a bunch of, like, extra money on that budget for the first film for them to reshoot effect scenes, and specifically Frank's birth scene.
Yeah. Fucking iconic scene. Very important.
So, I mean, yeah, he earned Barker's trust. They had a good rapport. And, I mean, he also, I guess Randel had say in how the first film was edited, even though he wasn't listed as the editor. So I imagine it's the editor, Barker, and Randel in this room. But they worked really well together. So he was like, yeah, like, first choice, like, please come in and take this movie.
Good. We like to hear it.
There wasn't too much interesting information about the casting, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that between Hellraiser and Hellraiser II, Ashley Laurence was cast in the film adaptation of Stephen King's novella Apt Pupil with Nicole Williamson and Rick Schroeder, going so far as to film an entire scene before that film's production and the movie itself was canceled.
I was going to say, that doesn't sound like who was in Apt Pupil.
No. Folks, go back and listen to that Apt Pupil episode that we did with Jen Adams, because, yeah, that was one of those big things. We didn't realize it had an aborted start with Rick Schroeder and a couple of other people. And I did not know about the Ashley Laurence of it all until today when you messaged me, Trace. That is shocking.
No idea. But again, it's really funny because this information is from the press kit. So you have Ashley Laurence being like, yeah, I was going to do Apt Pupil, but then they just canceled it. And one other thing of note is that Andrew Robinson, who played Kirsty's dad, Larry, in the first film, declined to come back for the sequel, despite appearing in the second draft of the screenplay. His reasoning, and I quote, "I will be honest, I was very disappointed with the script. I had such a good time doing the original because I just didn't know what to expect. It was such a delight that I really didn't want to dilute the experience by doing something I wasn't keen on." So I don't know what exactly his role was in the original script, unless it was just he comes back at the end and he's fine or something. Like, this reeks of he didn't have a big enough part and he didn't think it was worth coming back to do that.
I do have vague memories of like finding that draft of the script back in like the Wild West days of the internet, where you could just find stuff like that. And yeah, I think it's more like it was actually, instead of Frank messing with Kirsty to get her to come down to hell and find him, it actually is Larry.
It is her dad. Yeah.
Yeah. And she eventually gets him. So yeah, I feel like if you're Andrew Robinson, you're probably not in this movie until like the last third of it. So maybe he didn't like the idea of kind of being the damsel in distress and not really having anything to do until the last act.
I'm actually okay with the way it works out because I would prefer to see a resolution with Frank and Julia instead of Kirsty and Frank. I mean, Kirsty and Larry, sorry. But at the same time, there's no closure for this dad. Like, we don't know what happened to this. I mean, we know what happened to him, but like,
the dad's dead. What more do we need to know? I mean, no shade on Andrew Robinson because, yeah, if it's a Nev Campbell Scream situation where you're just like, oh, they're not going to give me what I want. I don't feel like it's a good time for me to come back. By all means. You know what? I mean, I'm not going to give that out to Clare Higgins because I really wish she had of, but I'm in full agreement with you, Trace. I think the Frank Julia stuff is way more satisfying than what we could have gotten out of Kirsty getting something with her dad. Yeah. Sure, whatever, but that's also not the relationship I'm most interested in from the first film.
Well, I also think the reveal that it's Frank tricking her posing as her dad is a really good twist.
It's so good.
It's so Frank, too. It's such a shitty Frank thing to do.
Oh, 100%. I can't fuck these ladies in hell, so I'm trying to get my niece here so I can fuck her. 100% Frank.
Now, y'all may remember the special effects being a bit of a challenge during the production of the first film, because it was the special effects studio Image Animation's first major project. But while they created the Cenobites for that film, they engineered everything else, and it was a learning experience. So they learned from their mistakes in their first film, but also between the two, they had done the effects for films like Waxwork, The Unholy, and Lair of the White Worm. So with their experience on those films, they were able to bring more of an A game to the production of Hellraiser 2.
Oh my God, Waxwork back for 2024.
I know. Do we have? Everyone, we will cover it eventually. Maybe it'll be our series. Whenever we decide to end the show, it'll be like our series finale.
Oh my God, you've been waiting X many years.
I remember being obsessed with that movie when I was a little kid, and then randomly stumbling on it was in my 20s or 30s, and I kind of had the same feeling because I was also obsessed with the movie Howard the Duck as a little kid, and revisiting it as an adult, it was kind of a similar thing. Where I'm like, what the hell is this?
Why? What is this?
Did I have horrible taste as a kid? Is that what I'm finding out here?
Maybe.
Yeah, that's absolutely what it is. All kids have terrible taste. Now, can either one of you guess what was the most difficult effect in this movie to pull off? And I will preface this with, it is probably not what you think.
Of course, yeah. Okay, so it's not going to be anything with Chennard. I'm going to say it's those stupid tables with the ladies bleeding under the sheets.
Okay, Brian?
I'm going to say Julia bursting out of the mattress.
Oh.
So it is Julia related. It's actually Julia's skin.
Of course it is.
Yeah. Because they had to, make an entire skin suit out of Clare Higgins, but also have it to where it would look kind of normal on Ashley Laurence and be skin tight on her.
Right.
So wait, to what? Well, now I'm wondering to what degree, because obviously there's scenes in it where it's just Clare Higgins playing Kirsty as if she's got Julia's skin on. But I can't think of many instances where, the only thing I can think of is the final face reveal where
that's
it's kind of
too.
that transition.
And I wonder if they wanted to maybe shoot more of it, had it actually looked good, whereas the way we have it, it's just a quick pull the face off type thing. We don't actually get to see Ashley Laurence with a Clare Higgins suit on her. Anyway,
things that sound like Silence of the Lambs, only it's in the Hellraiser universe.
So filming took place at Britain's Pinewood Studios over a 9-week period, beginning in January of 1988 and wrapping the week of March 7th. And where the first film was shot in sequence, which again is abnormal for a film shoot, the sequel was shot out of sequence, which again makes sense when you have, the budget from this went up by $5 million. So the first film had a $1 million budget. This film had a $6 million budget. And good Lord, is it all over this fucking thing.
Oh my God. Yeah. The world building alone is ginormous.
Well, there are parts. I mean, the third act of this movie, honestly, and it's funny you mentioned Freddy Krueger Chennard, because a lot of the third act of this movie reminds me of A Nightmare on Elm Street, specifically some of the Labyrinth stuff in 5 and New Nightmare, even though this comes out, after 5, but before New Nightmare, I think? No, before.
Yes, definitely before New Nightmare, because that's 92.
Before both, actually. I think 5 is 89, so I think this came out same year as Dream Master.
You are correct. Yes.
Hellraiser, trendsetter.
I know. I mean, the hell stuff in this third act looks fucking phenomenal. So, I mean, just...
And the fact that, as much as we maybe have some qualms or not even strong disagreements, but just we don't always love all the creative decisions of that new Hellraiser film, the fact that they brought back Leviathan and the Labyrinth is like, that was a strong creative choice because it is so visually memorable from this film. Well,
I think it's something we discussed in that Patreon episode on that film where it's like, this film is pulling a lot more from Hellraiser 2 than it was from Hellraiser 1.
100%.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and maybe that's why I liked it more than both of you.
Could be, yeah.
But yeah, so this film was released on December 23rd, 1988. Just, again,
Merry
15
Christmas.
Months after that first film. I know, this, what?
Nothing's, you know what? If it's Christmas, it must be Hellraiser.
I guess. Again, their idea was counter-programming, right? There was not a single horror film, or they even specified not like a male-driven action film, that was out at the time. So it was the only film of its type that was like really geared towards males. They did expect it to perform better than the first film, and while it was a box office success, it grossed $12 million against that $6 million budget versus the first film's $14 million against a $1 million budget.
And folks, if you're listening to this and thinking, oh my God, a Christmas horror film, yes, as counter-programming, but that never works, i.e., things like The Faculty and other more contemporary examples.
The Exorcist, too.
Yeah, go back and listen to our Patreon audio commentary on The Exorcist, because that movie was released on Boxing Day, aka December 26th, makes huge money. So it can work.
It can work. It
often doesn't.
That's the thing. It often doesn't. So it's always a gamble, but whatever. So yeah, but critically, it did okay. We're looking at a 50% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 5.3 out of 10. Letterboxd users have given it a 6.4 out of 10. Everyone go raise that score because it deserves better.
Jesus, come on.
Honestly, but that's a trend for the series as a whole. If I remember correctly, I think Rotten Tomatoes for the original is only 76%.
It's not as high as it should be.
Fun fact, just because we mentioned The Exorcist has like 78% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Which is, I mean, as we have discussed numerous times, it's an aggregate. It's actually not, it's not the way that you look at it like, oh, wow, only 78% of people like it. It's like, no, it's not that. But also, those numbers suck. Come on, people.
But yeah, that's really it. So on to you, Joe.
Okay, so because it's the 80s, we're only barely scratching the VHS surface. We do begin this film with a recap of the first film.
Okay, but it's not lazy like some of those Friday the 13th sequels where we're just like flat out copying and pasting the last 5 minutes of the movie onto the beginning of this one. We're at least doing a montage here.
Well, and what I think is really smart about this is that we actually get 2 extended flashbacks to the first film, but this first bit that opens Hellraiser 2 is just the climax. So it's like what you missed in the last couple of minutes of Hellraiser so that you understand where Kirsty is and why it matters, and then we'll give you some stuff about Julia and Frank later.
And this is such a horror geek minute detail thing that I noticed in this, but it does push that narrative of they're pushing Pinhead as kind of like trying 100%. To push the icon of Pinhead, because if you look at how it actually pans out in the original, he's actually, if I remember correctly, the first to go, and here they kind of they reconfigure the editing so that he's the last one standing, kind of like, putting him forth as like the big bad. So it's just kind of that first little push towards like, I think we've got something here. Let's see what we can do to push him forward a little bit more.
Yep. Pinhead, horror icon. This confirms his status.
Well, because we basically have 2 prologues here. One is this recap, and the next one is the birth of Pinhead.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're getting the genesis of your horror villain, that is very much we realize we've got something that we can sell all kinds of ancillary products and merchandise, and also this is the thing that drew people in, which I can't fault, because I think to a certain extent they are right. You know, they made a wise decision by putting Pinhead on the cover art for both of these movies. It's not as though it's actually Laurence holding the box, right? It's Pinhead. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, as we said in that first film, and even in this second film, this is not Pinhead's story. We're getting more of him, but this is not ultimately his tale.
Well, not to like jump ahead all the way to the end of this movie, but like, how do y'all feel? Because this movie does that thing where it's like we're giving not a full backstory for the Cenobites, but we humanize them to make 100%. Them more empathetic, sympathetic, whatever word you want to choose. What do y'all think about that? Because I think that's a very controversial decision.
I'm conflicted because there's that part of me, the Hellraiser, or I guess the Hellbound heart purist, who likes to think of these as like they have always been these, right, I don't know, other dimensional beings that love what they do. They're not like, they're not evil per se. They're doing what they do, and they're kind of they're coded as like an extreme kink community. And this starts getting into this idea that they were somehow like tricked, or that it was a bad thing that they became Cenobites, because when they remember, you know, they talk about, think about the pain and the confusion. And yeah, I think I prefer them as like, no, we are what we are. Fuck you. Right.
It just really, in much the same way that we're changing not just the origin of the Cenobites, but also, you know, who do they work for? What is the god that they worship? What is the world they come from? Yeah, I think this is trying to deepen the mythology, and it's just a question of how much do you want to know about the Cenobites, and do you like the fact that, I mean, I just always like the idea that there were more universes than ours. So the idea that all of the Cenobites are human suggests to me, oh, okay, so it's just an earthly plane kind of thing, which feels a little limiting considering the scope of the makeup effects that we're getting, right? Like when I look at Chatterer, I don't automatically think, oh, that's a preteen boy that's just been transformed into a demon.
That's kind of like jaw dropping for me when you see that it's like a kid. I was like, massive. Oh,
it's a gut punch where, yeah, you know what? Let's put a pin in that. I'm sorry I even brought it up, because it is a huge fucking moment in this film. So yes, we get this recap. Basically, it's a reminder, hey, your heroine is Kirsty Cotton, played by Ashley Laurence, and your villain is Pinhead, played by Doug Bradley. And then title card. We are here. It is number 2. Operatic score.
Steve is fully ineffectual. Okay, let's go.
Oh my God, Steve, fuck you to hell. So glad you're not here.
I'm sorry, but they're like, oh yeah, we let your boyfriend go a couple hours ago. Never hear from this fucker again. And I didn't even check on you.
He's gone.
Just could not get away fast enough.
They are ready to confine her to a mental institution, but he told them the exact same story.
Well, maybe.
Well, he said your boyfriend told us quite a tale, so maybe he didn't tell them everything, but I'm sure he mentioned giant monster.
But also, Trace, you're forgetting the patriarchy. He's a man. He probably was like, oh yeah, I went to this bitch's house and a bunch of shit went down. Can I go now?
Man,
and then he did that little cigarette trick, and they were just so enraptured that they were like, you're free to go.
And she never once asked about him. Like, she forgets about him the second they say his name.
As did all of us.
Which is why Kirsty Cotton she deserves to be on your lips when you're talking about best final girls, because this is a girl who has no fucks to give for these shitty men.
I think that's also, I've talked about why I usually prefer rewatching sequels more than the original, because I like that we have all the setup out of the way, and I like that all of this Kirsty's character development, she's still getting developed in this movie, but she's such a force of nature in this one compared to what she is in that first movie where she's playing the teen detective.
Yes and no, because I think when you go back and especially watch that third act, Kirsty is a very active final girl. Like, she is a heroine for days. She's got her hands on things. She is solving that puzzle box. She is bartering deals with Pinhead and the other Cenobites. And I feel like the second film is a really good continuation of that. But yeah, there's something more gratifying about you start the film and Kirsty knows exactly what's going on, and she's just headstrong through the whole film.
Yeah, I wonder too if it's because, I think we talked in that first film about, is this a slasher series? Is it not? I wonder if people forget about Kirsty as a final girl because it's not a slasher movie.
It just doesn't fit the mold, right?
Yeah.
It is also interesting to note that, like, Kirsty, she has a much more, like, World War vibe or feel in this one. Like, she's seen it all and she's kind of over it. This just happened. Like, this takes place the same night.
Day.
Yeah.
I love that, though. I love movies that do that, by all means. And that adds to the part two-ishness of this that you were talking about earlier, Joe.
Yeah, and I'm not, like, they're not doing it in a way that's not believable, but it's because it's kind of one of those things where she's just like, she's so over all this shit.
Yeah.
She can, like, like, yeah, she's sick of having to explain it.
She just wants to get it done.
It's also not done in a way where it, like, they don't try and, like, action star her where she's just, like, completely, like, desensitized to it. She's also still, like, clearly really traumatized from everything that's happened. So it's a really good balance that she's playing between, like, over it and also, like, this sucks and I don't, like, she's over it because, like, it's awful and traumatic.
Right.
Man, and she is so ready to go back into hell to save her dad. And I'm like, Mom, Dad, I'm really sorry. I don't know if I can
leave you in hell.
I can't. the stone wall opens up. Oh, no, thank you. I'm going to go to the next room.
Yeah, but I agree with you, Brian. I love the fact that she's not Ripley in Aliens, but she's also not Alice in Friday Part 2. Like, she's that firm middle ground. If anything, she is Sydney in Scream 2.
Yeah, I could see. I think that's a really good comparison.
So we've got this recap, and that we're not really even starting the film because we're already going into the Pinhead mythos. So we start at an undisclosed time, which once you start to figure out who Captain Elliot Spencer, played by Doug Bradley, out of Cenobite drag, if you know when he's from, then you can put an approximate time on this, but it's not like we get a time card or anything like that. So,
well, I'm sorry too, but both him and Frank, what is it with these hedonists, like, wanting to go into an attic with no furniture? Like, do you not have beds?
It just shows they're so focused on the box. They don't care about any of the creature comforts like a bed.
Because I think Frank is even naked when he does it in the first movie. He's just, like, sitting cross-legged on the floor. And I'm like, just your balls just, like, sagging on that hardwood floor, that musty attic. Like, blech.
Well, that's super Frank. He's just ready to fuck.
Yeah, he's like, give it.
I mean, yeah, of course. He's Frank. He's balls out, balls forward all the time because he is ready, as you said, Trace, for hedonistic pleasure. One of the things that is interesting is even though we're learning stuff about Pinhead's background as Captain Elliot Spencer, you know, obviously, folks, go and watch the third film and listen to our episode because we get a ton more, but we're still not knowing anything about him, right? Like, we don't know what's driving him to open the box. We have to assume, because he is framed the same way as Frank, that he is like-minded, right? So visually, we're filling in the gaps.
Like, is he also kind of a shithead? Like, it kind of makes you wonder, like, what kind of a man is Elliot Spencer pre-Pinhead?
Yeah, because even, you know, this moment where we see him open the box, he gets hooked as expected, and then in slow motion, we see him get nailed and turned into Pinhead as he's screaming, but there's still that fine line between pleasure and pain, right? You know, he's screaming, but is it because it hurts or because it hurts so good?
And they do cut in, like, the little shots of him smiling while it's happening.
Right? Oh, yeah. And again, like, the effects work in this is just like, because it's also tentacles that are, like, pounding the pins in his head. Ugh.
Anticipating those proboscis that we're going to see when Channard gets Cenobited.
Oh, yeah.
But that's got me thinking now, though, because, like, to what degree does, like, the box as, like, an entity know kind of who it's going after? Because when it goes after Frank, he just gets, like, torn to pieces. He doesn't get Cenobite status. Elliot Spencer gets Pinhead status.
He's
I will say too, there's the I want to know, but I don't want to know the rules of like how they choose what happens to people. There's an interview with like two, I want to say film critics on this Quartet of Torment thing, and they talk about how if you notice, all the men get like the chains, but all the women get like doors open up for them when they solve the box.
Oh, so the hooks are amalgamous to penises, and then vaginas are amalgamous to doors opening?
I guess so. I mean, one of them definitely gets the better end of the deal. Well, arguably, although you could argue that the men want these chains in them.
This is true. Penetrate me, daddy. Okay, so the interesting piece about the transition between Elliot Spencer and Kirsty waking up is that it almost frames it as though she is having a nightmare about Elliot Spencer's existence. But also, we just know because of the recap, oh, right, she's traumatized. She's in an asylum now, and it's all the same day.
And she wakes up after all that traumatic shit to have some, like, random police detective just, like, hovering over her bed.
Yes, this is Ronson. He is played by Angus MacInnes. I love that this movie recognizes that this character needs to be here because, yeah, there's dead bodies. Cops need to be on the scene. But also the minute we open the door to the labyrinth, this guy is out of the film. Honestly, I'm so thankful because this is not a movie where I need a cop helping Kirsty or walking into the labyrinth and not knowing what he was going to get in. I have issues with Tiffany. I don't think she's the most exciting character. I don't love Kirsty having to be a quote unquote mother to her, but I will take all of that over having to deal with Ronson being in the rest of this film.
Yeah, honestly, the biggest issue with Tiffany is I just think she's underdeveloped. I mean, and granted, there's a lot of stuff in her hell scenes where I was like, oh, I don't remember. You're getting her backstory in that. And I'm sorry, am I correct in thinking that Channard killed her mother?
100%.
Yeah. Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, because I think he saw the potential in her to be able to use her. So as soon as he could get rid of the mother, then, all of a sudden he takes over being her guardian, and then he can do whatever he wants.
I do want to say, though, rewatching this, I was like, it's pretty convenient that just the lead guy of this psychiatric institute is also a big fan of the limit configuration, has also been trying to find it his entire life, and also happens to have a girl that is really good at puzzles.
Oh, see, Trace, that tells me that you have not read enough of the Hellraiser comics or some of the short stories, because I always look at this as, Channard has this interest and he has set himself up to be in a position where he can collect the boxes, have an unending supply of patients to experiment on until he finds a Tiffany so that he can get what he wants.
For sure. I just mean that, down the road from the house where Frank lived, there's this other guy who's also looking for this box.
It's Londoners.
Is it though? Because all the cops are American.
Yeah, they're in New York. Isn't that what we decided? The first movie's set in nowhere America, but filmed in Britain.
I honestly think this is some kind of alternate universe where, because it is so hard to follow in terms of where the hell are they? Because there's scenes in the first one, there's scenes where Kirsty is clearly walking along the Thames, and they talk about Julia being back on her home turf, and it's just and here a lot of our lead characters, Julia, Dr. Channard, they're all English, but then you get a couple of cops that are from
very
New York.
American. Yeah. These movies feel like they have a sense of placelessness, which in some ways I think makes them more continental. This could be happening in the UK. It could be happening in America. It could be happening in your backyard. Ooh, it's so scary. But yeah, it's it's a bit of a mess in terms of clearly we just hired a bunch of British people and then shot it in the UK, but also we wanted to make it appealing to Americans.
Yeah, this is real appealing for all Americans.
Well, because at least you recognize most of the dialect, right?
Yeah, sure.
Which is just funny considering the content of these two movies. They think the sticking point for Americans is going to be the accent is off-putting. Not the guy with pins in his head, not chains ripping people to literal pieces. No, it's that accent that's just, I can't connect with the material.
Speak English.
It's the real sticking point. Yeah. Needs to be set on American turf, or at least have American actors, but also give me the dude with the head full of pins. Okay. Okay, so Detective Ronson informs Kirsty that she is at the Channard Institute. She learns that, yes, her former boyfriend Steve is okay and nowhere to be seen, and also that the police services and coroner's office and so on are at the house, and they have taken possession of a bloody mattress.
Dun, dun, dun. Which I love that Kirsty's like, y'all have to destroy it. And that guy's like, okay, bitch. We'll destroy this mattress.
I do love how, like, I think Ronson literally just goes, yeah, okay. And then just walks out of the room.
We're absolutely going to do that. Wink, wink. So, cut to Dr. Philip Channard, who is played by Kenneth Cranham. He is lecturing to a room full of people while he performs brain surgery. And among the people who is in there with him is Dr. Kyle McRae, who is played by William Hope. He could be a doppelganger for Steve in a lot of ways. He will be positioned as a future Steve, i.e. a paramour for Kirsty. And thankfully, this dude is just... he's a red shirt waiting to happen.
Because the character this guy reminds me of the most is Nancy's, like, psychiatrist, useless boyfriend in Nightmare on Elm Street 3.
Oh, yes.
Except this movie has the balls to just kill him off halfway
Kill him off.
And I will say there is definitely some overlap in the Steve-Kyle Venn diagram. I mean, they're very close to a circle. But I think Kyle's saving grace is his just overwhelming sincerity. Like, he is trying to do the right thing. Yes, he is still fully an ineffectual white man, and he is treated as such. But he genuinely wants to help Kirsty. And I think that's more than you can say about Steve, who I don't think has enough thoughts in his head to know what he wants. So, like, at least they gave Kyle some kind of, like, a character push and motivation. So yeah, he's like, I don't know. I've got a little bit of a sweet spot for Kyle, at least compared to Steve.
Well, I do actually still feel bad when he dies because I'm like, because it's really early. Like, but yeah, I think it works though because again, it establishes those stakes, and obviously Julia would kill that man.
100%.
I don't know if y'all clocked this, but Dr. Channard uses the term "the final solution" in his brain surgery.
Does. Yeah. Which, in case you didn't realize, he's a villain because he's using terms like that.
Yeah.
Just doing it real subtle, like.
Yeah. Definitely not disguising it at all.
He says something and he's like, or the final solution, if you will. And I was like, dude. Too soon.
Just absolutely not. But, he's obviously very well respected. He has the confidence of his peers, including Kyle, who clearly looks to him as something of a mentor. So he looks at Kyle and says, well, we've got this new psycho bitch, and I basically need your help gaining her trust.
Handler, basically. I've got plans with this mattress, so
I've got a date with a bloody mattress. So if you could handle this crazy girl, yeah, that'd be great. Okay, so obviously Channard does take an interest in the mattress when he overhears Kirsty demanding that we destroy it, and also because Julia could come back from it. So when Kirsty ends up sneaking out of her room that night, she does see Tiffany in another room. The girl is obviously very good at solving puzzles, and this is where she and Kyle, not Tiffany, but Kirsty, start to make a relationship, and he reveals that Tiffany, who is played by Imogen Boorman, is an orphaned mystery, and Kirsty immediately just goes, well, those hands could get her into trouble. She could be opening doors, so, keep an eye on her.
I also feel like there's something so, like, deeply insidious about the fact that they claim to not know her name. But if we're led to believe, it is heavily implied that Channard killed her mother, there was some point where, like, they had to go through, like, paperwork.
And files.
Like they were there in the daytime. And he has such overarching power at this place that he was able to make a woman disappear and this girl's background disappear so that like the people who work there don't even know her name.
Well, and here's the thing though, because I think I walk away being like, okay, like she came there as a little girl, he killed her mom, she's grown up there. No, she's been there for 6 months.
Yeah.
So he killed her mom 6 months ago.
Yeah. These sequences, having just rewatched Sleepy Hollow for our 250th episode last year, Trace, it really reminded me of Ichabod's flashbacks, where there's a certain level of repression mixed with trauma, and it results in a kind of special character where they're a chosen one. But I like how Tiffany's background is mixed into the narrative, but it's not overbearing, you know? We don't have to watch her go through traumatic dreams or anything. It's like, oh, she gets these flashes, we see the mom, we understand the relationship, and then we move on.
Well, and because the reason her mom brings her to this institution is because puzzles are consuming her life. So she literally won't do anything but solve puzzles. And I should have done more research into this, but I didn't look to see if there was any mention of Tiffany on like autistic coded characters in the horror genre, because I wonder if that was intentional too.
It seems like it could be likely. I mean, this idea that she's obsessed with puzzles, we have seen this before, Brian, when we've read some of the Hellraiser comics, of which Tiffany is a pretty prominent member in several different arcs, but also in some of the other short stories, not her specifically, but characters who are obsessed with puzzles. They get sought out on the internet to solve a lament configuration for rich proprietors and so on. So this idea that, you know, these people are being hunted or collected in the same way that the boxes are is a pretty pervasive Hellraiser storyline.
All right.
And if you like that, you should listen to Brian and my other podcast, because we talk about that kind of shit a lot.
Smooth.
A little bit.
Okay. Yeah. So that night in bed, Kirsty sees a vision of a reclining skinless man who is once again played by Oliver Smith, reprising the same role when he played Skinless Frank in the first film. And she immediately mistakenly assumes that this must be her dad, because he has written, "Help me, I am in hell," in blood.
No.
On
I
the
am in
wall.
hell, help me.
Whatever.
You completely fucked up the whole interpretation of it, Joe.
Just fire me from the podcast.
I'm sorry, this is a meme. Like, people use this as a meme.
Truly, this is every person who works in an office building on Friday afternoon at 3, when it's like, the boss would like to set up a meeting at 4:00. You're just like, I am in hell, help me.
I do love that he's first like, I am in hell, just to make sure she knows where he is, and then help me. But if it was help me first, then, you know, she wouldn't get it.
Right. Yes. All the difference.
Meanwhile, I'm over here just thinking about the meme version where they've just changed it into, he just drew like a dick and balls in blood on the wall.
No, that's too obvious a giveaway that it's Frank. It's like, dick and balls, you come to hell, please?
It just says you up on the wall.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm gonna fuck you. I'm gonna fuck you.
Hey, Niecy, you up? Come to hell. Oh, it wouldn't be Hellraiser if we didn't have some kind of kink, right?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. In the morning, Channard takes the elevator down to the maintenance floor, and we see that he has a lot of patients that maybe either aren't on the books or they are coded more dangerous, more scary. And yeah, clearly he's going to be experimenting on these folks. So this is our first glimpse of the character Mr. Browning, who is played also by Oliver Smith. And he is the one who we will later see that he sees maggots on his skin, which is why he's constantly screaming, "Get them off me."
Okay, can I ask, like, for you, did this sequence almost read as being so over the top that they were kind of trying to maybe go for a few chuckles here? Like, when he opens the one door, like the one window, and the person's just there going like, bah! Like, right, like, there, and he doesn't, like, change his facial expression. Like, I'm not saying it's a good joke, but I feel like they're trying to get, like, some dark laughs out of this scene.
Maybe. I mean, I didn't laugh, but I won't.
Again,
shut you
I'm not
down on
saying
it.
I did. I'm not saying this was good humor, and I'm not saying like this is something that we should be going for. But it doesn't play as scary. It almost just plays as if it's like they're going for over the top. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, because this character is basically Michael Shannon from Bug. He's got delusional parasitosis, so he just thinks there's bugs on him, in him, everywhere. So, actually, in my proposed Hellraiser 2 remake, this character is played by Michael Shannon.
Oh, okay.
And it's a sequel to Bug. Oh, wait, he's dead.
No.
Bug. Never mind.
That's not a horror film, or maybe that's too much of a horror film, so no. I can see what you mean, Brian. I personally read this more as we're leaning heavily into the tropes of, when you think of a quote-unquote mental asylum, these are the sorts of figures that you expect to see, not the, Chernard is the kind of guy who's so civilized, he's so upstanding, he's a brain surgeon. And I love this idea that he keeps the respectable, quote unquote, patients above ground. And then he's got this secret floor for the delinquents and the undesirables.
Maybe that's my thing. Maybe I'm looking at this through like the 2023 lens where I'm like, people aren't like this. And it's so over the top that I'm like, they can't be doing this with a straight face. And I guess I got to remember 35 years ago, they very well would have been doing this with a straight face.
It is extra. Like it's very big in a lot of the ways that this film is, right? If the first film is, I'm not going to say subdued, but it does have that aura of sexy classiness in all of its gross horror stuff. This film feels much more conventionally, okay, it's a sequel. We need bigger, more extravagant set pieces. Go for the gore.
Well, it's like, because I would never call that first film restrained, but it is restrained in a way that this film is not.
Right. This film is unhinged.
Yeah.
Okay, so we get this match cut where he is looking at Mr. Browning, and then we see Kyle is sort of doing the same thing with Kirsty, which I think is a bit of a narrative fake out. We're meant to believe that Kyle could be on the same level of villainy as Chernard. And of course, we will know eventually that is not true. But initially, we see him watching Kirsty. She's very upset because she's had this bad night. She believes her father is in hell. No one believes her. She's in an insane asylum. So, basically Kyle says, you know what? I am good. I'm going to go and check some things out. He overhears Chernard making arrangements for a delivery to his house, which of course will eventually be revealed to be the bloody mattress. And then Kyle listens to Kirsty as she speculates about the relationship between Frank and Julia, who are played respectively by Sean Chapman and Clare Higgins. And this is our second extended flashback to the first film. So we basically get to see everything that we need to know about how they function, including up to how Julia was betrayed by Frank and died. But Brian, I'm going to turn this to you because I'm pretty sure that we get new footage from a wedding. I don't remember this from the first film.
I remember glimpses from the first film. I wonder if they maybe had more like B-roll that they just decided to like incorporate into this.
See, I thought their sex scene was longer in this one than what we got in the first movie.
It could be.
I honestly think, because it doesn't look like, I don't think they shot anything new. If I had to guess, I would say they probably had more stuff. Because, I mean, we all know how much they had to cut from that scene in the original. So they had, and, we're talking a year later. So they probably still have access to all that stuff. So that would be my guess. They probably just recut some of the stuff that didn't make it into the original.
Clive Barker's like, oh, you want more sex? Oh, you want more wedding stuff? Yeah, I've got it. It's just in the corner of my bedroom here. Come over and pick it up.
Or when they're screening this, they're like, we're going to give you an X for those thrusts in that sex scene. And they're like, no, it was y'all. We cut it down. It's in the first one. Y'all approved it. But it's like actually extra more footage.
Right. Just splicing it in. There you go.
They're just counting on the executives to be lazy enough not to go back and look at the first one.
Well, and at this time, it would have been difficult to go back and look at the first one.
Truly, yeah. So that night, Kyle breaks into Chernard's home and he discovers, yes, the bloody mattress is in his office. Kyle's reactions, man. This is odd. Oh, it's fucking weird. It's like, I mean, is it, Kyle?
Weird box, bro.
He also sees no less than 3 lament configurations in little, what are they called? Trace?
Oh my god, Joe! I was about to ask you, like, Joe, what are these called? You know what they're called. Yeah, I have in my notes. He's got 3 lament configurations under some glass cloches on his desk.
Oh my god, fucking cloches! Back to haunt my nightmares and dreams. Yes, I do love. This is classic sequel extrapolation. We're building it up. It's so much bigger and better. But this moment, if you are a Hellraiser fan, if you even appreciated the first film, when Kyle walks in and sees no less than 3 of these motherfucking boxes on this desk, you just go, oh shit.
But okay, do you think these are failed attempts at recreating it, or do you think these are actually like other lament configurations from around the globe?
See, I wondered that, but then it occurs to me later in the movie where you're going to see these things in action. So I think these are fully functioning lament configurations.
But he couldn't solve them, and I guess Tiffany hasn't had her hands on him yet.
Just that. Yeah, he's been collecting them, but he hasn't found the right person to open them. So as you said, Trace, yeah, it's a matter of narrative convenience, or it's, the story is zeroing in on the moment where everything comes together so that we can finally open the doors to hell.
Well, because the way, again, they describe, and they meaning Atkins, Barker, and Randel, where they're like, hey, this is a story about obsession, like a search for knowledge. And I was like, this is Cate Blanchett in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, except whereas she just dissolves into thin air, which is very unsatisfying. Channard gets something like this.
Yeah, in a way, he gets what he wants, and he likes it. And then he just gets thwarted.
Well, you know how to improve Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, then. Just cross it over with this movie.
Or not. Keep that away. Keep it away from my precious baby.
So now we're gonna remake all the Hellraiser movies and all of the Indiana Jones movies, and then cross them over. That crosses them over.
Interesting. You know what?
$1 billion idea.
Now I'm intrigued. Okay, so we get this roaming POV camera across the maintenance floor, and we stop at the door of Mr. Browning. So we know that Mr. Browning is probably going to encounter one of these boxes, which likely doesn't mean good things for him.
No.
So Kyle hides as we see Channard escorting Browning into the mattress. He's provided with a razor so that he can gleefully hack at the maggots in his skin.
Okay.
This has got to be the hardest scene in the movie, right?
I think this is the hardest scene in the franchise to watch. To this day, I remember the first time I watched this scene, and I was like, it's one thing, because you see his hallucination, you see the maggots on his body, but the second he takes that first slice of the straight razor to his chest, it is. Yep. I mean, it's something to... Again, there's a little bit of comedy here because Channard, side-eyes the door and is like, oh, better shut that. And he shuts the door after he started, cutting into himself.
Yep. Don't want the neighbors to see that. Don't want the maid to see that.
This could be embarrassing.
This is horrifying. It's one of the most painful, moments of film that I've ever seen. I wince watching this. And... the blood just pours. And of course it leads its way into this orgasmic birth sequence. But before that, it's just horrifying. I mean, it's all horrifying, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is definitely one of those scenes that is an extended cut from what I was used to seeing on the R-rated DVD growing up. The amount of time they spend just dwelling on what this poor guy is doing to himself. It is just fucking horrific.
And there's some close-ups, when the blade pierces the flesh. You see the cuts appear. And I was like, I don't know how they did that, but it's awesome.
It's great makeup, yeah.
I mean, yeah, this is, because it's also a self-harm scene, so there's an extra factor of ickiness to it. I just...
They also do a really good job at intercutting it with what he is seeing, because if you're just watching this, you're wondering what could that possibly be doing.
Yeah.
But in his delusion, you do see it is stripping some of them off. It is effective in a way. So it's just.
Yeah, this poor man. It's so hard not to watch the scene and feel really bad for Browning. He's not a character. We don't know anything about him, but seeing his perspective and what he thinks he's accomplishing mixed with Channard and knowing the position of power that he's in and just giving him the tool of his own destruction for his own nefarious purposes. It's really dark. I love how quickly we establish Channard as this ultimate villain. He's so despicable. And then this is just really, really hard to watch, but it leads into a kind of, I don't know, like, we know we can't top the Frank regeneration scene from the first film, so we've got to find a new, fresh way to do it. So we go from this extreme gore, which is kind of what the Frank regeneration scene was accomplishing, and then we just have Julia's two arms jut out of this mattress from an overhead shot, and it's, I don't want to say it's as effective, but it is really effective.
I think it's effective in a different way, because Frank's birth is entirely like effects. Like, there's not a human in that shot. So it's like puppeteering, reverse something, whatever. This is an actress under this makeup. It's not Clare Higgins.
No, it is Deborah Joel.
Thank you. I would argue it is as effective. It's just not as impressive from a technical standpoint. Although, I would argue the makeup on Skinless Julia is even more impressive than the makeup on Skinless Frank. If the blue veins on her skull, like, ooh, God, like, this is like one of the most affecting scenes of horror that I've ever seen, and I that sounds hyperbolic, but I mean it.
And I think it's kind of brilliant in that they don't try and just recreate Frank's regeneration. Like, there's no way they were going to come close to touching that. So they were like, how do we change this up? And I think they do it in a way that is like between, you know, watching poor Mr. Browning go to town on himself and then that just burst of the arms coming up. It's such, like, the resurrection scene in the original is such a great slow burn sequence. Yeah. And then this is just like, bam, in your face.
And she's writhing around on the floor. There's blood going. It looks so slippery. Like, oh God. Honestly, the best detail for me outside of just the spine is the shoulder blades.
Ooh, yeah. Everything on the back looks great.
Yeah, I mean, this looks great.
The pops of purple of the veins, like going up along the side of her skull. Like, it's so well done.
Yeah. One of the other, I think, more enjoyable things is the whole first film, you could say it's a little bit more patient in its reveals, right? Like, we really have to drag out Julia feeding men so that Frank can regenerate his skin and his muscle and all that kind of stuff. Because Julia is so recently dead, she's quite a bit more agile. So we immediately turn this into, yes, a chase as Skinless Julia tracks down Browning, but it's, you know, he's barely able to move and she is not fully regenerated. So it's like almost a homage to Freaks in a way. And again, like, this is a really interesting way to bring Julia back, and she just immediately claims her first victim, but it's scrappy and messy to the point where she's exhausted. And of course, we then end the sequence by Channard kicking the mattress over to her to help her out when she pleads for help.
The blank stare he gives throughout this entire thing is perfect because, like, you get the sense he's not getting any joy out of what's happening. All of this is a means to an end, and he is looking at it with like the
appropriate amount of horror.
Yeah, but he's also looking at it with like a sociopathic level of scientific curiosity. Like, he is looking at this with just like, he doesn't like turn away. He never turns away. He barely blinks. He is going to watch all of this because it may be horrifying, but he's also fascinated by it.
Yeah, like Trace, I don't think he's horrified by this at all. I think he's witnessing something he envisioned in his mind forever, right? Like, this is the start of the plan that he has been moving towards for maybe decades at this point.
Right.
And I think scientific curiosity is the absolute right description because he doesn't turn away. He doesn't look disgusted. He's more interested, right? Like, ooh, how is this going to unfold?
Meanwhile, poor Kyle is behind the curtain, just like,
Dude.
oh God, don't come over here.
The sound effects of her sucking the life out of Browning, and we're just focusing on Kyle hidden on the other side of this curtain, like, oh my fucking God, what am I hearing right now?
One of my bullet points in my notes, in all caps, is just the sounds, period. The makeup, period. The spine, period.
The everything.
But then the punchline, right? I'm cold.
I'm cold.
That and the, don't be scared of me. Sure, because you have not proven to be threatening at all.
Well,
Right.
because I also love the way, because I think Frank did this where he just shoves his hand into someone and like gets them, but I love that she makes out with them while she shoves her hand in the back of their neck.
It's much more intimate.
Yeah.
Which makes sense again, right? This is a woman's version of this. So there's almost a seduction level to this. And we see that she's working Channard even as she's getting rid of various people so that she can become more powerful. But I mean, I'm not going to lie. For me, one of the most iconic shots in this film is, as you said, Trace, the next day she comes out, she's, skinless and all this other stuff. She's drinking champagne. She's smoking a cigarette for the first time. But when she first comes out and she is still skinless, but wearing his men's white suit with the bloody marks, it is
white
a
suit.
It is a fashion moment. Like, I gasp every time I watch the movie.
And it's such a fucking power move. Like, you
Yes.
know she's looking at that, not thinking like this is going to be a suitable garment for the situation she's in. This is, I'm here and I'm
She's making it her own.
She's
She's taking over his space and his clothing. Like, she is, like, it's a woman wearing a men's suit and just claiming it as her own. Like, yeah, it's 80s fashion. Women were wearing these kinds of suits and everything, but it is such a power move in his space.
I'm telling y'all, if we have any future drag kings that are going to go on Dragula in like the next 10 years, like, for the love of God, do this outfit.
Well, and it's funny too, because it almost feels like Channard implicitly recognizes what she's trying to do, because he immediately wants to cover her up in these bandages and this nice sea foam sort of party dress. And I'm not going to lie, she looks incredible. It's very Bride of Frankenstein meets high fashion, but we can't disguise the horror of it. And even him trying to disguise what she is, she touches him and he has to wipe away the blood from his knuckles, and she forces him to kiss her. It's all so good. She's so in control.
The whole time, I'm just like, don't touch her. Don't touch her. And I love, when she grabs that cigarette and it's like on his knuckles. I was like, oh, like, what do you even do? I was like, wipe it on your pants. Oh, but no, then it's on your pants. And that's just even more gross.
I love... There's so many little blood moments. My favorite is the teeny moment where she's in the full bandages. They start making out and he like drags his face across her cheek, but he catches just the underside of her eyelid. And then you just see just this little trace of blood down the side of the bandage. And it's constantly reminding you that gore and viscera is like just under the surface and ready to kind of mess things up.
And I think that's what makes it so effective. This and in the first one is just how wet this looks. Like it's just very wet.
It's disgusting. Yeah.
They also do a good job at, like, again, they're separating themselves from the first one where Frank is in this dirty, dank attic the whole time.
Yeah.
You get this contrast here of all these white, clean lines that she is fucking up just by being there.
It's so good. And then we end this sequence when she has basically made Channard her bitch. And she says, okay, now all we need is skin.
Okay, and this is where Bryan, again, his horror nerdiness kind of interferes with his enjoyment, because for me, there's a little bit of murkiness in terms of like the rules on how this regeneration works, because
it makes no sense.
In the first one, you got Frank, he comes out, he's half a person, and within like 3 or 4 guys, he's basically fully regenerated.
Oh yeah, and she needs about 50.
Yeah, and she's come out with everything but skin, and it takes like half a block of people to like, where are they getting these people that it's just like it's not noticed. Like,
well, they're all women too, aren't they?
Yeah.
I don't know that they all are, but I mean, the woman that we see screaming is a woman of color. I think you could, if you wanted to make a soft interpretation, these could be patients of his from the maintenance floor that won't be missed. Or it could be, oh, she's got that exotic look to her, so maybe, because she's not white, maybe this means that she could be an immigrant, she could be an unhoused person. Like, the idea is that he is so powerful, he's able to just collect an entire attic of people that no one fucking misses.
Also, did you notice that when she goes in for that last kind of like skin suck, she goes in without any skin on her hands. She comes out with fully manicured, nail polished fingers.
I wrote that too. I was like, oh, she got a manicure.
Yeah. Again,
that one girl was real tasty. She gave me a full-on manicure.
What a great touch, though.
I do want to praise the technical aspects of this scene, though. Like, this is a long take. We start with, Julia taking care of this woman, and then we just do this nice slow pan around all of these bodies in various desiccated, husky forms. And then when we come back around, Julia is fully healed. It is such an expeditious way to communicate what is going on, and it looks great.
Well, she's almost fully healed. She just has a patch on her back that's still spine exposed.
Yeah, because we need Kyle to finish that part off.
See, if nothing else, that makes him more useful than Steve.
Truly, yes. I love, I'm going to talk a lot about the fashion specifically around Clare Higgins and Julia Cotton, because that's the only reason I'm here tonight. Sure. But the moment that Channard unwraps that bandage from her head and we finally see Clare Higgins, right? Because it's been this other actress doing the role. She looks like she has stepped out of a fucking shampoo commercial.
Yes.
Clare Higgins gives this Gilda, kind of head shake with the curls. And you're just like, oh
okay,
my God.
Brian, she looks like the Who Me gif.
100%. It's so wild.
And if I remember correctly, I think she has earrings.
Oh, maybe.
Oh, God. I didn't even notice. I just, obviously, she's not going to do this, but I want her just to do this whole kind of you can't see me, but I'm free.
I'm back, baby.
I'm back, baby.
It's such a great fucking moment in this film. And to me, Brian, you said, it seems like the opening of this film recontextualizes Pinhead to be this ultimate villain that we're building up. But this to me communicates that they understood implicitly what they had in Clare Higgins and Julia Cotton, because this is a moment. We didn't need to do this for this secondary villain. And yet here she is getting this standout sequence.
It's almost like they, for as much as I think they didn't understand the level to which they weren't going to be able to make this a mainstream movie, I do think they at least understood, okay, Hellraiser or Pinhead is going to be our guy that gets the mainstream butt in the seats, but for our diehard fans, Julia is where it's at.
Right. The queers are going to eat this shit up. Okay. So, hey, guess what? There are other characters still in this movie. You know what? I love Kirsty. I love Ashley Laurence, but it's really hard when we transition back and forth between Julia and Kirsty, because I'm like,
right.
So what's Julia doing right now?
Well, but that's because Kirsty's stuck with Kyle for right now. I do love his reaction. He's like, it's all real. She was horrible. She had no skin.
Yes, Kyle. Thank you for playing catch up.
I don't know how you deliver that line in a serious way, but it's so funny. It's so she was horrible. She had no skin.
I do think he is endearing. You're right, Brian. He's definitely a step up from Steve. He is more likable. He does have more agency, and he comes on board more quickly. And I think that that's another smart move by this production team, and specifically Atkins as the screenwriter, because he understands we're going to make these comparisons, I think. And that's what makes it hurt when, at this point, Kyle and Kirsty have snuck into Channard's office. They've seen the boxes. Kyle is trying to be manly and he says, don't do anything. I'm just going to go and check to make sure the coast is clear. Immediately gets killed by Julia. And it's sad. We actually care when he dies, even though we recognize, oh, well, you were trying to be a show-off man, and that's what got you fucking killed because Julia saw right through you.
I will say, though, one of my favorite moments in this movie is when she's like, what's your name? Kyle. I'm Julia. And like that moment of realization on his face before she grabs him and sucks the life out of him. Oh, it's so good.
Ooh, but Trace, you forgot. She also gets the inversion of Frank's line. She gets to say,
Come to mother. Yeah.
Also, the Foley on the crunching sounds when she bites, not bites, but when she sicks the fingers into his neck.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's good.
Oh, yeah. All of it's good.
I do at least also appreciate that, like, because I remember in past viewings of this, I had interpreted it as like he kind of got like half seduced into it, and like paying attention this time. Actually, it's more he is deer in the headlights. He is terrified, and because I do remember the sequence playing out where basically like she's kissing him, but turning that into like taking his essence, but he's not like into it. He is so petrified with fear. She's the one who goes in for, the death kiss. And you just see like his last kind of expression is the, oh shit, when she says, I'm Julia. So it's this poor sweet summer child just winds up, just winds up completely eating shit, at the hands of one of the all-time great villains.
There we go. Yeah.
But then we got to have a face-off between Kirsty and Julia. Snow White and the Evil Queen. Actually, I'm sorry. That is one of my favorite lines. So, we have like I'm no longer the evil stepmother. I'm the evil queen. But then she's like, come on, take your best shot, Snow White. I love it so much.
Backhands the shit.
Backhands her into unconsciousness.
Oh, it's so good.
I'm surprised because I think there's a version of this that could play very unsatisfying, right? Like, oh, we finally get to see Kirsty face off against Julia, but it's happening so early in the film, it's not the climax. But I really like this interaction. Like,
oh, yeah.
We're not ready for them. Like, Kirsty needs to go through a bunch more things. And it makes sense to me that, Julia would just be reveling in her newfound power. And of course she's going to goad the stepdaughter that she fucking hated from that first film.
And it's really just tipping off that, like, even Kirsty even says it, like, oh no, not again. Like, this is what this scene is establishing. Like, this isn't the face off. This is the, oh God, it's all, I'm like neck deep in this again. And I was I just thought I had gotten out of this.
We're back, baby.
There's so many good reactions from people when they realize what's going on, and they're just like, oh shit. Well, we'll get to Tiffany's line of dialogue later, but it's one of the best laughs in the movie.
God, I wish Borman delivered that line better, though. It just always lands with a thud for me.
Okay, so I don't necessarily disagree, but the punchline is that we then cut to Kirsty's reaction, who looks at it like, what the fuck?
Truly.
I rewound it twice to watch it again.
Because it's so anticlimactic too. Like, it's, again, if we're gonna, like, kind of making some comparisons to Nightmare on Elm Street, like Joey in the Dream Warriors, he has that whole track where he doesn't talk,
right?
And he gets this big hero moment. Here, it's just her going like, "Oh shit," and that's literally like the only thing she says.
The only line.
Well, it's supposed to be like, "Oh, she speaks. This is what gets her to speak," but it doesn't feel like a momentous occasion. But I don't care because Ashley Lawrence's reaction
it is gold.
Funniest thing in the movie.
Ashley Laurence is eating in this movie. Like, she understands Kirsty Cotton so much better. Like, I can't disagree with you, Trey. She's more interesting in this second film, if only because she has more confidence in who she is, even though I think she still had that agency in the first film.
Well, she has it for the entire film, as opposed to, like, the back half of that first film, because she's not really in the first half of that film that much.
Right. And also we get to juxtapose her with Tiffany, who constantly has this vacant, where am I? What's going on? Look. So Kirsty just comes off all the better as a result. So that moment that you're talking about, is it a bit of camp? Yes. Is it also a great moment for Ashley Lawrence? Yes.
Well, because her reaction isn't just like oh, that's weird. It's more like, what the fuck? Did you speak?
And that's what you said?
Mm-hmm. Okay, but we're not there. We're not there.
Yeah,
yet,
we're not there.
Yeah, okay. So before the face-off with Julia, Kirsty has stolen a photo of Captain Elliot Spencer from Chennard's files. So we just need to put that in our back pocket, quite literally, and we will come back to it later. So with Kirsty unconscious, this is when Chennard brings in Tiffany, and he and Julia stand behind a two-way mirror and just set this girl off to open up the lament configuration. These two together, I do not love Chennard in this film, but watching these two interact like they are members of high society and all the ways that Julia plays him from this moment on is just so satisfying.
Well, yeah, this isn't an equal partnership. Like, Julia has the upper hand this entire, up until, Vortex world.
Up until a certain point, yeah.
Yeah. But you don't realize that until later, right? Because but I love that subversion because you almost think, oh yeah, Chennard is her new Frank. So right. I love that she's revealed to be the puppeteer of all this. Well, kind of. I mean, she's being puppeteered by Leviathan, but whatever.
Sure. Yeah. I also love that even in this moment where we're seeing them basically manipulate Tiffany into opening up the doors to hell, and we see the two doors open on either side of her. I love that there's also a door opening behind them, which insinuates, even when you think you're in control, there's other things happening behind your back that you don't realize is going on.
I mean, that's what Pinhead says, right? It's not hands. It's not Tiffany's hands that call us. It's desire.
It's also like within that idea of Julia playing Chennard, it's interesting that he never once considers that she is so willing to open this box if she is someone who, like, if he believes she has escaped hell, right, and she doesn't seem to have any problem with opening that box again. It's
red flag.
Yeah. But he is just so obsessed.
He's so confident because he's such a fucking idiot, right? I'm this literal brain surgeon. I'm in control. And it's like, bitch, you're getting duped by this femme fatale right next to you.
He's he like Frank, he's a narcissist. Like it's not possible for someone to pull one over on him because he's a genius. Yeah, it's
yes. Okay, so the doors are open. Enter the Cenobites. So once again, we are reunited with Chatterer, who is played by Nicholas Vince, Butterball, who is played by Sam Bamford, as well as female Cenobite, played by Barbie Wilde. All great. It feels like barely any time has passed, which of course in the world of the film none has. But yes, then we get this moment where we think they're going to kill Tiffany, but of course we have to play by the rules. So Pin says it's all about the desire, and we know he's talking about Julia and Chennard, who are already into the labyrinth. Like, they didn't even wait to see what happens to Tiffany. They just took off.
To be clear, though, because when Kirsty opened the box in the first movie, she didn't know what the fuck she was doing, and they were like, "No, bitch, you're coming with us."
But she wanted to open it.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, I think that actually says more about Kirsty than anything, because and you could argue, and I think, Trace, if we're going to look at this realistically, you could look at it as they just didn't really think about that. But I think it still kind of works, because if we are looking at it where Kirsty is always kind of on the fringe of kind of being not as dark, but like in the ballpark of kind of holding that like anger and darkness as like Frank and Julia.
Absolutely.
I think there is an argument to be made that winds up being as much of a commentary about Kirsty as it does about everybody else. Because when she quote unquote didn't know what the box was and opened it, they were 100% ready to take her ass in. Yeah.
Because they see something in her. And folks, if you haven't read the comics, there's a bunch of them, but there's actually one really infamous run, and it divided Hellraiser fans, but Kirsty eventually becomes the Hell Priestess. So she takes over for Pinhead when he abdicates Hell.
What?
And it totally makes sense when you start to think about it.
Wait. Is Hellraiser Hellseeker canon in these comic books?
Not in that way. No.
Okay.
They don't do it in terms of like, oh God, please don't say Hellseeker in earshot of me.
It's the worst movie. It's the worst movie in the franchise.
It's 100% the worst one.
But also, Inferno's right there, so what are we saying?
Well, Inferno's the most boring, but there's competence there, whereas Hellseeker is just an egregiously bad movie.
It feels like it fundamentally misunderstands Kirsty Cotton, and it's a huge insult to the character. Yeah.
Awful. Which, I mean, there's a reason why they did it that way, because of like production, they didn't get her, they did, blah, 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 but it's horrible.
It's bad. Yeah.
But no, the comic books take much more interesting approaches to it. They actually incorporate at one point Harry D'Amour also takes over as the priest. But they don't just take up the mantle and go along with like business as usual. There's a lot of like politicking and like different directions that each one like takes the mantle into. So it is a billion times more interesting than what Hellseeker was trying to do with the character.
I might need to check out some of these comics, only because I'm leading into the film here, but like the conversations between Kirsty and Pinhead, I find to be some of the most energetic scenes in both of the first two films. Like I love watching them speak to each other, and it's so good. I want more of it.
You know what I hate the most? I'm not disagreeing with you at all, Trace. I fully agree. But know what I hate in retrospect? Julia never has a conversation with Pinhead.
Oh, yeah. That's a real bummer. That is a huge bummer.
Just, ooh.
Yeah, that's weird.
What about that third film?
Imagine, though, like... if we got that third film, that was the concluding part of this trilogy, not to say that Julia would be Angelique, but she would be the Angelique figure in that third movie, which I'm just like, give that to me now.
Just, yes. Or I think, so the reason that Bryan and I started such sites to show is because we were doing it in the run-up to the new 2022 Hellraiser. Right. And we wanted to explore all the possible directions that film could embody. So we wanted to read some of the short stories. We wanted to read some of the comics. We hypothesized whether Angelique could come back, whether Julia could come back. And, that's a lot of what the conversation is before we then see that finished film. But there is just so much potential in these two female characters. And folks, if you've listened to our conversation on the work print for Hellraiser Bloodline, you'll just hear us gush in the same way we're talking about Julia Cotton only for Angelique. And it's because these characters, they're just so interesting and there's so much untapped potential in what we could be doing with them. And it's like, ooh, it tasty little morsels, right?
In these first four movies, like, I think the biggest sin this franchise commits in 1 through 4 is in the way it handles its women villains. Yeah. It just does not know what to do with them. And that, honestly, that starts in the first one. Because for as great of a villain as Julia is in the first one, she gets such a... her death. And that is like part of what I love about the existence of Hellbound is that it kind of it saves that and it makes her arc in 1 better by extending it into this. But even here, she doesn't get like the ending is also a little anticlimactic. She just gets sucked into the vortex, and then we all know. Listen to any one of the conversations Joe and I have had about Angelique and the way she is disrespected in this franchise.
Yeah. And if you want to dispense with them, that's okay. I'm not suggesting that they needed to take over and become the main villains of the franchise, but just considering how they are dispensed in these films, it's so anticlimactic. It's so muted. And again, it's like maybe it's because we were holding these cards ready to play them in another film, but also maybe don't anticipate that you're going to have another movie and do these characters justice when you've got them.
I mean, it is because here's the thing. I like the Chenard stuff at the end. Like I like the makeup more. But here's the thing. Do I think it's half as compelling as Julia? No, not at all. I like it. I think it's fun. Big tentacle monster, proboscis everywhere, like whatever.
Sure. Dicks on heads, man. Yeah.
But it comes at the expense of the Julia character, which makes me not like it. Like on its own, I think it's good. I think it's fun. Well, maybe fun's not the right word. But
it would be great in its own film if we were positioning Chennard front and center. And you could argue, oh, well, since his introduction, he's clearly the villain of this movie. But that means that we technically have an antagonist in Pinhead. We have a villain minor in Frank. We have a villain major in Julia. And then also a villain major in Chennard. It's too much.
That's the thing. For all of this in a 95-minute movie, like, it's just, it doesn't have, and I feel like it, if the trilogy had gotten funded, I think there's a world where Julia doesn't come back in this movie. She's revealed as the surprise villain of the third movie.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, that doesn't exist, so.
No. So much speculation. So much wishful thinking.
Joe, we keep thinking we're going to get closure on this too, and we just never do. Like we just keep talking about it. We keep trying to find a way to like kind of close the lid on it, but it just the yearning is just too much to keep in check.
Truly. But thankfully, we still have more Hellbound to discuss. So. All right. So at this point, all of our characters have entered the labyrinth. So we've got Julia and Chennard, but then also Kirsty has gone in looking for her father. And Tiffany is also in there because, bitch is just wandering around, entering the Carnival Arcade with the Hall of Mirrors. And
okay, but this is fantastic, though. Like, this looks... I completely forgot about this carnival shit, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. So, question for you folks, because I completely agree. I also forgot about it, think it looks great, but it feels a bit like a drop thread. I kind of expected we were going to get to see more of this sort of thing, and the fact that it doesn't come back is disappointing.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out if this was Tiffany's hell or if this is just a segment of hell for, like, generic hell.
I also wondered to what degree there is really personal, like... Because Pinhead hints that there are personal hells, and that, when Kirsty confronts him, he says, oh, he's in his own hell, completely unreachable. But I also know, like, he's fully willing to, like, fuck with people and mess with people's minds. And they're able to get to Frank's hell. So, like, I think there's a level to which it's, like, personalized, but I think it's all kind of within the overall labyrinth. I did see that sequence as being specific to Tiffany, though, since she was getting those flashbacks of, like, what happened to her mom and things like that.
But you know what's a great image that will always stick with me is a baby or a fetus with its mouth sewn shut.
Oh dear. This is very upsetting. Even if, unfortunately, I don't know if it's the 35 years or if it just maybe never looked super great. The baby doesn't look 100% convincing.
Joe, does it look better than the CGI baby in Inside?
How dare you, but yes.
Yes, it does.
I mean, if nothing else, it's just a very deeply upsetting image. And the fact that this baby is big, right? Like, this is not a regular sized baby. This is a giant baby.
Yeah, we're like in Alice in Wonderland right now, or Dumbo or something.
Ooh, yes, yeah.
The clowns and, like, the funhouse mirrors was pretty effective, too.
No, yeah, I love it. But this also feels the most indebted to Nightmare on Elm Street.
Right.
I did appreciate, though, that it's also like they found a way to incorporate some exposition without it feeling like exposition dumpy. Like having those little fleeting glances into like what happened with Tiffany and her mom. It was a really good way to do that without making it just feel like, okay, we need to explain this.
Yeah, we need to give her a flashback. No, we're just going to get like flashes, basically. And we have the mother saying like, help my daughter, like 5 times in this movie.
Yeah. So the mother is played by Catherine Chevalier, and again, doesn't really get a ton to do outside of these very brief glimpses, these flashes, and yet it's enough. It's so expeditious that we completely understand by the end of this and then the next sequence that we see her in basically what has happened.
Yep.
So Kirsty has found herself lost. So if Tiffany is in the funhouse mirror with her mom and the clowns, then Kirsty is back on Ludovico Street. So we see the telltale stained glass door. But when she goes inside and she sees all these familiar, pictures of her family on the armoire and that kind of stuff. Oh shit, all these pictures are filling with blood. The cabinet's falling over. It's filled with cockroaches.
This looks so good. But again, all I could think of was Nightmare on Elm Street. But it nevertheless, it's really good. Like all the blood like pouring everywhere. Ooh, hell yeah.
My favorite moment of that, though, is like she's looking at that picture of her mom. She sees everything go awry. She looks back down, and it's a Julia glamour shot looking at her.
And again,
100%.
Ashley Lawrence's eye acting, like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
That bitch isn't my mom. Get that out of here.
Yeah, the amount of times that Ashley Lawrence has said "what the fuck" with her eyes in these
Yes!
movies, yeah,
She has very expressive eyes, which I really appreciate because, I mean, this isn't a silent, unlike Tiffany, this is not a silent role for her, but
Right.
It's always, because she didn't really have much of a career after these Hellraiser. I mean, at least in terms of like big films, and I do think she does really good work in these movies. I do think she gets more to do and better work in this movie than the first one, but it's always just a thing where I'm like, oh, like I would have loved to have seen what she could have given us if she'd been given a chance.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Like, why didn't this open the door for her to be in other films? Even in the same way that we're bringing back Nancy in a bunch of different, like, and I know we talked about Hellseeker. We're not going to talk more about it.
That movie doesn't exist. It is some idiot made that as fan fiction.
But it's more to the fact that, Ashley Lawrence clearly proves herself to be a capable actress. Why isn't she getting these kinds of memorable guest spots in other horror films, other horror titles? Like, why hasn't somebody said, ooh, that'd be a great piece of stunt casting, Mike Flanagan, hey, do you have a new show that you could maybe, like, slip her in as a therapist in?
I mean, and no shade to Barbara Crampton, but, like, all these Barbara Crampton gigs, like, where are these horny 80s kids who are now horror directors? Why aren't they jizzing all over her and putting them in their movies?
Right. Yeah.
I wonder to what degree, though,
that.
maybe she doesn't have an appetite for it. Like,
Maybe also possible.
And not to say that, like, I don't think she's super separated herself. Like, I've met her at a horror convention, so, like, it's not like she's trying to.
She's still doing the rounds.
Yeah, but, like, maybe she just doesn't have as much interest in kind of getting back into the acting side of it.
Maybe.
Right.
That's entirely possible. I always feel like we as fans forget that this is a job still for these people.
Right.
and I mean, again, like in a Hellraiser movie, there's a lot more to it than just acting. Like, it's a lot of special effects stuff and makeup, and there's a lot more components to it. And so, I don't know. And also, I don't know what her experience was, right? In the 90s when she was ideally, I would assume, trying to get work. Maybe she just got disillusioned with it.
Well, all this to say, Ashley Lawrence, if you happen to hear this, we would love to see you come back and do some more roles.
Yeah.
And bring Clare Higgins with you.
Oh my God.
Well,
please.
Clare Higgins was in a movie, I think it was 2 years. It was an indie horror film about nuns, and she played like the Mother Superior of the
I remember that. It was a movie.
Is the movie bad, but she's great in it? Please.
No, and I mean yes and no. Like the movie's not great. I wouldn't say it's horrible, but it's not good. But she doesn't really have enough to do in it.
Yeah, I don't remember her getting a ton to do in it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're still on Kirsty as she's dealing with this house basically falling in on itself. So she's kind of flipping out. She's calling for help. This is when the Cenobites return. And they immediately recognize her. And I love that she's like, cool, I've dealt with you idiots once before. I've got the box, so I'm totally ready to go. And Pinhead just goes, boop, and he transforms the lament configuration into a kind of half box, half like stabby thing on either side, which of course...
It's a rhombus.
Okay, it's a rhombus.
Let's not forget, they had just met the day before.
Dude, okay. But again, I love the, Kirsty, we've missed you, child.
It's been like 12 hours, dude.
Well, but I think we're led to believe that time moves differently in hell. Like, it's been 150 years-ish for Julia, even though she's been dead for 6 hours.
Right. I will say, we've not talked enough about the way that the film is shot. I think in part because the makeup effects, the gore is so great that it's really easy to get fixated on that. This moment where the Cenobites are kind of circling the frame as they're taunting her, it looks a bit like a spinning mirage, and I just find it really, really effective.
It's so disorienting. Like, it's so well done because she's in the middle of like multiple hallways that spinning around that way. And then, like you said, Joe, like the Cenobites are spinning within the frame. It's just everything about it is like you don't know which way is up.
Yeah.
Well, and this is Barbie Wilde's first turn as the female Cenobite because she wasn't in the first movie, but she doesn't have a lot of lines in this, but I love it as they're doing this whole thing. She's like, perhaps you're teasing us. Are you teasing us? And like the excitement in the female Cenobite's voice as she said, are you teasing us? Ah!
It's so flirty and fun, right?
Yeah, right? Like, I kind of hope you are. That would be fun. Yeah.
But then the punchline is that haunting Pinhead line, we have eternity to know your flesh.
Yes. And they just let her go because they know that they'll find her again later. You know, sure, take a run. We'll catch up with you later.
She's like, BRB.
See you later, girl. Mixer at 6.
Scream if you need anything.
Sidebar, I need someone to like Yazify Pinhead or something. Like, Yas, girl. You know, Baba shook him or something.
Literally, when we're done with this, I'm making a gif of that moment when Tiffany says, oh shit. I just want that gif of Ashley Lawrence's reaction.
You bitch, what are you talking about?
Because I'm going to reply to everyone that I think is stupid with that gif.
Nice. Okay. Okay, so meanwhile, Julia and Channard are exploring the labyrinth, and, you know, Channard can't believe the things he's seeing. He sees a menage a trois, and just like the picture frame, one of the women's faces turns into Julia, so she's clearly working some magic. But if you watch Clare Higgins in all of these scenes, she is constantly just watching Channard with this bemused expression like, I'm gonna fuck you up so badly.
You're so fucked, and you don't even know how close you are to just being utterly fucked.
I love it. I love it.
It's so good. So yeah, he gets stuck watching this sexy scene because he's a dumbass man. And then she basically prods him and says, you know, we need to keep going because I have such sights to show you. I love this idea. You know, even if we don't know that she's working for Leviathan, the fact that she is using the same words, the same phrases as Pinhead, it's such a clever way to anticipate this reveal.
Here's the thing. In any regular sequel, like reusing those lines from the first movie or repurposing those lines, it would be obnoxious to me. I'd be like, what? Why? Stop it. You're a sequel. Just be your own thing.
Do your own thing.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It all works here for me. None of these lines are cringe. I love every second of it.
I think the only issue I take with it is it is setting up like Julia as like she is passing, like they are passing the box on to her, and
passing the box. I love it.
Yeah, but instead, you know, they just make this pivot into Channard land. Like it's
I don't think this is in any of the drafts, but would it have been better, hypothetically, if, you know, she puts a Channard in the box and he just goes away, and then she gets Cenobited?
Yes, that would be so much. That would be a million times better.
Yep, a million times better.
Yeah.
I agree.
Or he just gets murdered, right? And then maybe she becomes a Cenobite or something like that. It would just... There's such a more obvious way of doing it, even though I know that we've been putting in the time and effort to build up Channard. It just... Yeah, like you said earlier, Brian, it feels like they fundamentally misunderstand the appeal of Julia. And it... Like, she's more a conduit.
And, like, a really fun inversion would have been they established, like, she kind of takes on a lead Cenobite role, and he kind of becomes her first lieutenant. So they both get the Cenobite treatment. And he's, like, one of the troops. And it's like, this is kind of what you wanted, but you're going to be in a role that you're not used to.
I think you're subservient to me.
It's because also this film is much more female focused, female forward than that first film. So it's surprising and disappointing that we sidebar the main female villain for the climax of this film.
Especially because you already did that in the first one.
Yes.
Stop doing that.
Yes. Which, I mean, granted, at least Channard doesn't kill her. It's just some vortex.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, it would have been worse if Channard had killed her, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I think so too. Even if in the moment, the first time I saw this film, when she just disappears, I was pissed.
Honestly, too, like, I would have taken a stupid sequel tease, like, cliffhanger at the end, where all of a sudden she's like, I'm back!
Or even just a hand, right? Like, a hand comes around the corner or something.
Where, like, you see, like, in the hallways of the labyrinth, you see, like, her bloody footprints, where she's still kind of, like, wandering around. There's so many ways. So many ways.
We have fixed this movie about 5 times in the last 2 minutes.
There you go. We fixed it. We fixed it.
I did it.
Okay, so folks, let's take a tour of hell via M.C. Escher. And folks, if you don't know who that is, you probably recognize his work because he is a very famous Dutch graphic artist. He makes a lot of woodcuts, lithographs, mesolinths, and a lot of them were used by mathematicians and so on. But he's very fond of images that turn into themselves. Like anybody who's seen Labyrinth, the David Bowie film where Jennifer Connelly has to like walk up and down stairs and it looks like she's walking upside down, also an Escher image. So this is what the Labyrinth, aka the world that Leviathan, the triangle deity hanging in the sky, lords over.
Rhombus.
It's all based on Escher drawings. And I think this is one of the strongest visual decisions that this film makes, and I fucking love it.
There are shots. I don't know if this is like this. Did y'all all watch? You all have this 4K, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't, because there are shots, like certain wide shots or long shots of the Leviathan look noticeably of lesser quality than other shots in this Leviathan like labyrinth area, and I don't know why that is, if they were like extra scenes added in or like lower quality scenes that weren't in the original cut. But that aside, I just like the artistry on what I'm assuming are matte paintings for some of this labyrinth shit, and Leviathan, the rhombus, like it oh god. Woo.
They do. I do think they do a really good job at using like painted and matte backgrounds to make these sets look a lot bigger than they are. Like that endless corridor look that they do, that you realize, like, you know, just because obviously we've watched enough of these, we know where to look for the seams. You know, when you pay attention, you can see like, oh, that's a painting of a corridor. But like getting lost in it, like it just seems so much more vast than it really is.
Yeah, like they're very clearly reusing the same set of hallways when Tiffany and Kirsty are wandering about, and when we're walking up top and looking at Leviathan in the distance, it's the same shot, and we're just changing like, oh, that's a male figure, that's a female character, and so on. But yeah, there's just something really visually compelling about this. I think in part because we're so used to a certain look for hell, right? It's got to be fire and brimstone and people being tormented and so on. And this just feels like a big, empty, vacant metropolis.
It so much better matches the aesthetics of the Cenobites. Yeah. You know, there is an order to the labyrinth the same way that there's an order to the mutilation that these demons have.
Right. So as Julia is giving Channard the business, she's, you know, showing him around. She points out Leviathan and she calls him Lord of the Labyrinth, whom she serves in this world and his, the god of flesh, hunger, and desire. And well, obviously we've talked about how this film is more interested in obsession and the chase and less about the sex and the kink. This, to me, is a really good intermingling of the two concepts.
Oh, 100%. And at the risk of just being the person that just repeats lines from this movie, I just love that. Oh my god. No, this is mine. The god that sent me back.
Yes.
I mean, I do love the reveal that it's like, yeah, dude, I've been playing you this whole time.
The whole time?
Let me go.
Well, and look, I don't think there's a ton of, and Joe maybe disagree, but a ton of explicit queerness in this film, but whenever Channard gets turned into a Cenobite, he gets mouth raped by these things.
100%. Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
And even the way, you know, there's something very delightful about him because he is erudite, he's very opinionated, narcissistic, very full of himself. So when she essentially guides him into the Cenobite elevator that appears at the end of this strip, and we get to see, he gets mouth raped, he gets barbed wire spread across his face like a cheese grater, and then, you know, when he comes out, this thing just kind of plops onto his head like it's almost sucking out his brain. You don't even get the impression, like, he comes out noticeably stupider. He's cracking one-liners. Like, he's kind of been turned into a fucking idiot. And I love that his version of, ooh, to think I ever doubted it. How could I have been so uncertain and so on? And you're just like, you're a joke now, buddy.
It's so messy and undignified for someone who fancies himself like this, erudite kind of like academic, and he's going to unlock all these secrets, and they just make him a dumb puppet. Literally.
It's also incredibly satisfying when all of this happens and he looks taken by surprise, and you see his point of view through the razor wire, Julia with the wind blowing that voluminous fucking hair, and she just goes, "Goodbye, doctor.
You wanted to know. Now you know."
Because you wanted to know. And now you know. Just every piece of dialogue that Clare Higgins delivers, particularly in this section and any of her interactions with Kirsty, oh God, they're just so fucking chef's kiss perfect.
And like now just kind of thinking back to that idea of kind of revealing Julia as a Cenobite, like this would have been, because we've been playing with that idea of like, you know, the kind of fakeness of the skin that she has. Like, can you imagine if there was like this big reveal where the skin tears off and you just see like Julia in her final Cenobite form? Like how great that would have been.
And what would that be
the last thing he sees? Oh boy.
Just a giant
she
vagina.
just whips it off like a reveal, right?
Yeah.
I would love to see her razor sharp diamonds.
Yeah, it would be the evil queen. She would be the evil queen Cenobite. So like this big crown like configuration on her head.
A cape made of flesh.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
With like points on the collar too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wait. Challenge to listeners. Anybody who's an illustrator, we need you to draw this for us and then tag us, please.
And we will share it.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So we've talked about all of this good stuff. Unfortunately, now we have to go back to Tiffany and Kirsty. I mean, I love my girls, but also... So... they have met up at this point. Kirsty has pleaded with Tiffany, hey, you can get us out of here. We need to work together. And unfortunately, she then promptly does not listen to Tiffany because she needs to go back into the Ludovico house because she's still looking for her father.
Okay, but this is good. Frank's hell of just naked, bloody women under sheets that he's not allowed to touch is the perfect hell for this man. I mean, like, do I want him to be getting like ripped apart for all eternity? Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
But it is his hell, and his hell is not being able to touch naked women.
Yeah. I do love that. Like even his hell is unimaginative. Like like I feel like the Cenobites just stuck him in a corner and they're just like, fuck you, dude. Just here, you're gonna get tormented by all the sex you can't have.
It's because he's basic.
They left him a hole for Kirsty.
Well, but also if you read into what Brian was saying earlier about Kirsty being more on a parallel line with Frank and Julia,
right? This
could have been them saying, oh, sure, Frank, yeah, call out to your niece, see if you can get her in here, because we secretly also want her in here.
Oh, I like that. I like that more.
Also, they kind of know how that's going to pan out, and they're kind of like checking, oh yeah, I'm sure that'll go real well for you.
Oh, I guess that's the other hell, right? Like you're going to have this permanently empty slot because you're never going to get this girl.
Right, exactly. I do love this set, though. You know, to me, this looks like some kind of ancient morgue. So the tables come out kind of the way that we see a coroner pull out a body on the slab.
But like they're big stone slabs.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we've got this ringing sound effect because it's a closed chamber, and the writhing of the women with the whispers and the gasping and the moaning. It's really interesting. And I like how, you know, they come out and they're clean, they go in, they come back out and they're covered in blood and so on. It's all just very good. Yeah. And of course, Frank thinks that he's the master of this domain, so he's got his fucking switchblade. He's making idle threats. Oh, you thought it was daddy. It was actually just me. Now I'm going to fuck you. And, you know, she just says, oh, really? And then she lights the room on fire.
Which I love that she like thought or knew that this would work, because she just spills a candelabra over and yes, literally the whole room just goes up. This room of stone.
Like it's almost like the room wanted to light on fire. Like again, like the Leviathan kind of knew how all of this was going to pan out. Like,
Sure.
we're just going to leave Frank at Hell's Kitty table until he brings Kirsty in, and then she'll fuck him up, and then we'll have her.
What I do love, and this is so pathetic, is that once she does this, Frank isn't like, he's just like, my face! My face! My beautiful face!
It's Luke Perry from The Simpsons. My face! My valuable face!
I mean, yeah, he just immediately crumbles. Quite literally, he just tears at his face until he's once again skinless because he has no backbone. You know, he might as well be playing at the kiddie table with crayons.
He's having a temper tantrum in which his skin comes off.
Mm-hmm. Which just makes it all the more gratifying then when Julia walks in. She's got Tiffany and she's going to threaten to kill her, but not really, because she just kind of immediately lets her go when she sees Frank, because it's so much more satisfying for her to listen to him try to claim ownership over him and then just rip out his heart.
Like, it's almost like this is dessert for her after everything she got to do to Channard. She's like, oh, this is my lucky day.
And I think in the idea of these filmmakers, this is Julia's big climax, which is why they're okay letting her go in the vortex at the end, because at the end of the day, we're paying off the events of the first movie with this.
Right.
And I get that, but at the same time, it does kind of make everything that comes after this feel a little bit less important, because this is a very interesting dynamic between Julia and Frank, and now it's done, but we still got 20 minutes left of this movie.
Yeah, it's not that we don't have a climax to come, but this feels like a climax because we are so invested in the drama between these three characters, right? And even though Kirsty is technically a bystander to all of this, the insinuation that I get in the moment is, oh, now that Julia has gotten rid of Frank, she's going to turn her attention, and we're going to get the battle between Snow White and the evil queen that we were fucking promised earlier.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, we don't.
Because a vortex opens up for no reason.
Yeah, so this is just one of the fun games that seems to happen here in Hell. So the girls manage to escape, but Tiffany realizes, oh, we're probably going to need that box if we're going to get out of here. So she kind of accepts Julia's hand, kind of falls into her to try to force her down the vortex. The visual of Julia latched on to, like, she's got her hands out, she's clawing at the walls of this vortex, and the skin starts to rip. Oh boy.
That shot of her back skin tearing is great. Like, that's a fantastic shot.
Yeah. You know, if the skin was the hardest part of this film, between this and then, the expected reveal that, of course, Kirsty puts on her dead stepmother's face and skin, it makes it worth it.
Yeah.
Okay, so unfortunately, Julia just basically gets sucked down this vortex to hell.
And we will never see her again.
Not as the character, Thankfully, we will still get a couple more scenes with Clare Higgins, but the character of Julia, gone forever.
And, like, not just in these, like, in any iteration of Hellraiser.
Wait, she's not even in the comics?
Nope.
No, this is it.
Whoa.
This is what we're saying.
What?
It's like people don't understand.
Okay, wait. But do you think there's something about, like, them using Clare Higgins, like, visage in comics that she denied? I guess they could just make it someone else. That's confusing.
We speculated about it because, like, Tiffany comes back, Kirsty comes back, Pinhead comes back, Harry D'Amour comes back. I don't think Frank comes back, so this is the end of him as well. But it does feel like people just overlook Julia every time.
Yeah.
But also, we haven't had a run in the comics in a very long time. Like, there was a period of time when they were very active, and then they just kind of stopped. And I don't know if it's because they decided, oh, Hellraiser isn't a property. It's gone dormant. It's all DTV sequels now. Brian and I were really hopeful that the new film was going to jumpstart a new wave and that we might actually get to see people saying, hey, are there more stories to tell about Angelique and Julia? Because I think people might be interested. And it just unfortunately never happened, in part, I think, because the new film just went to Hulu and we've never gotten a physical release.
Yeah, because we've got Hellraiser comics from 89 to 94, and then the resurgence was 2011 through 2015. Oh, and then a couple in 2017. I mean, y'all know this, obviously, but...
Yeah, we've got some episodes on them if people want to hear us unpack our thoughts.
What? Y'all?
What?
Yes.
Yeah.
The hell you say?
Okay, so Tiffany and Kirsty escape back to the Institute, so they go through the open gate. A fun fact, if you, again, still have no idea who Escher is, there is a painting of his on the wall when they come back into the room, so you can see that's the nod to the artist. And then they have a quick moment where they kind of fall apart. And I love this moment. You know, Trace, you and I talk frequently about how characters never get to grieve. They never get a moment to process their trauma and their emotions. And this is brief. Like, this is very short. But I love that we need to take a moment to say, holy fuck, I can't believe we got out of that alive.
And I do think they are taking that moment to kind of, again, push towards, like, the false climax to lull you into a sense of, like, okay, it's all over.
Okay, so
you think they're safe.
Here's the thing. So, the first draft of this script, whenever Atkins turned it in, they were like, cool, but what we want to do is this. We want to take your entire script and condense it to 60 pages and make that the first 2 acts of the movie.
Oh.
And apparently that is kind of what happened. There was supposed to be some big event that happened at the second act, at the end of the second act, that would lead into the third act, and the third act was going to take place entirely in the real world. Obviously, that's not what happens in this movie.
Well,
but
sort of,
I found that really interesting. Like, you turn the first draft, it's like, great, cool, condense those 90 pages into 60. We're going to add on another 30 after that.
That won't feel disjointed at all.
But that does explain a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because so many of these scenes feel not too short, but they feel truncated. You know, there's these moments where even when Julia rips out Frank's heart, you think we're going to have more of a tete-a-tete between Kirsty, Tiffany, and Julia, and instead we're just in the hallway and the vortex is opening up.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kirsty and Tiffany decide that they're going to try to leave the Institute. This is when the sky turns dark. We get to see all of the patients are in their beds. They're already attacked by the hooks. They're playing with these lament configurations. So shit is going down. And that shit is Chenard, who we have previously already seen reemerge from the Cenobite elevator. But yeah, Dickhead basically makes his full emergence in Freddy Krueger mode.
I mean, full on, the doctor is in.
So many fucking medical puns. So many. Too many. An excessive amount.
They're not good, and they're not clever, and I think part of it is that I rebel against this idea because all of the other Cenobites that we've seen are either mute, or they chatter, or they are very eloquent. And for Chenard to just be this hokey fucking joke.
But doesn't that track for his character?
It does, but I don't know, it doesn't help to make it go down easier because he just seems like such a fucking idiot.
But looking at it through the lens of what you were saying is like, this is almost, because a lot of, like, we'll see in future iterations, like there's a lot of like poetic justice in how they make Cenobites. So like maybe this is like the ultimate joke they pull on Chenard by making him this fucking clown. And I don't know. Again, it's kind of one of those things where are we giving them too much credit? But it at least does make that a little bit more palatable to think of it as like, no, this is the punchline to the joke that is Chenard. They turned him into a guy who thinks he's smart.
Stand-up comic.
Yeah. They turned him into a lounge comic, basically.
Except they didn't realize the real punchline was Ashley Lawrence's eye face acting whenever Tiffany speaks. What the fuck, bitch? What the fuck did you just say?
Oh my god, that's the most you could manage? Really? Those are your first words?
Yeah.
No, I'm coming down hard on Chenard. I don't like, all of the dialogue and that kind of stuff. But I do love me these claymation proboscis that, if I need a flower, if I need a creepy ass finger making a come hither motion, or if I need a stabby scalpel, it all works for me. I love these visuals.
Well, and so here's the thing, though. So, I mean, because we've talked about how, oh, is it a little weird that we humanize these Cenobites? That being said, I do really like this scene where Channard kills all the Cenobites. I think it's a really good scene, even though I would prefer that the narrative went in a different direction.
So I say yes to this, and I feel like, Brian, I'm going to speak for you. I don't mind this. It's just way too fucking fast.
Yeah, I'm conflicted in that. Like, I definitely agree with Trace in that I love Channard, like, in a vacuum. Like, I love the character design. I kind of love everything he's got going, but I think it comes at the expense of Julia and, to a certain degree, the Cenobites. Even Kirsty, because there's a degree to which this showdown is so fast that it almost they use the Cenobites to show how powerful the Channard Cenobite is. And I would have loved to have seen something that was a little bit more drawn out and a little bit more like back and forth. Like it's over way too quickly.
Well, but yeah.
Honestly, it reminds me of the same struggle we had with the Angelique Pinhead Marchand character in Bloodline in the 1996, right? Where we think we're going to trap him. We try to lay this thing in the lobby of the hotel and it doesn't quite work. And then all of a sudden Marchand just gets his head lopped off and Angelique is basically out of the film. It's like you've got too much power in too short a time. And particularly with Channard, for me, it's unearned. Like, why is he so powerful? These Cenobites have been doing this for so long, and yet he just throws a harpoon through all of them and they're dead.
That is the thing. I appreciate, again, I think it's subversive to be like, yeah, this guy just kills all these people that you thought were like not even, I don't even know if I called the Cenobites villains in any of these films. Like, I don't think they're villains. They're just doing their job.
They're antagonists.
Yeah. But I appreciate, because you don't expect this to happen. Like, this is a shock when you're like, oh shit, all these Cenobites were just wiped the fuck out. So as a concept, I like the idea.
Okay.
But
in execution?
Well, I think it's what you're saying. It doesn't feel earned. Like, in concept, I like it, but in execution, none of it feels earned. It feels like, oh, we're just going to wipe the slate clean because we have a 95-minute runtime to hit.
Yeah, and that's what it felt like. It felt like at this point they didn't have probably the time or the budget to really have like a drawn out, like, just like this could have been a very epic battle between these two, or between these two groups, and it winds up being, it is very impactful though, and there's a degree to which you do kind of wonder, like, is it because Channard is really powerful, or has like the very recent realization that they're all actually like were at one time human kind of like weakened them to a certain
I think
degree.
It's a combination of both, to be honest. And to piggyback on what we mentioned earlier, again, this Chatterer being just a kid is horrible.
Yes.
Oh.
So how, Trace, I think you said, oh, this is subverting our expectations or it's unexpected. It never occurred to me that we would do something like this. And we don't linger on it. I don't think it's particularly exploitative or gratuitous, but that moment that the pillar rotates and you see that it is a preteen child who has been impaled, shocking.
Yeah, and I think that's what, the fact that they spend so little time on it is what makes it so shocking and what makes it so, like, I saw this probably for the first time. I was younger than that kid was in that scene. So for me, that's something that just like my imagination would not let that go. Like, what was the situation that this kid wound up becoming the Chatterer Cenobite? Like, that stuck with me for a long time.
Right? Like, what did this kid do?
A child playing with the box and being turned into a Cenobite because he desired it.
I mean, we're assuming this kid was a bucket full of innocence, and he might have been just the worst kid in the world.
He could have been a budding Frank Cotton. You don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Tabitha, is this one of my preteen villain boys that got turned into a Cenobite?
The future of horror is who?
Chatterer? Yeah. I also really enjoy, we didn't really talk about how Leviathan is basically a lighthouse, and when he shines his light, or when it shines its light on you, you get these kind of reverse images that expose your past. But also Channard now has this interesting power where he can shoot Emperor from Return of the Jedi blue light force. And I love the moments where he hits Pinhead and he slowly is removing the pins from his face until it's just Elliot again.
Yeah.
And then
really
maybe
good.
one of the best throat slits in all of them.
yeah.
Looks good, hey?
Yeah.
But
And Bradley plays it really well too. Like trying to like catch like something and he can't do it. Like it's painful to, like, not just the obviously like the wound, but like watching him try and recover from it and like not be able to like get a breath in is really just like uncomfortable.
But, and while there's not very much, I think there's maybe 10 minutes left in this movie, the Cenobites are out. Like, they're not in the movie
They're
anymore.
done. Yep. Okay, so the hospital is going to hell, quite literally, because, all these patients have boxes and Chenard's on the loose. So Tiffany slow motion runs back into the labyrinth. She needs to get I'm sorry, Trace, what is the configuration of this lament configuration?
My God, it's a rhombus, Joe. It's a
Rhombus.
parallelogram with opposite equal acute angles, opposite equal obtuse angles, and 4 equal sides.
Okay.
Did I look that up? Yes, I did.
God, Jesus. Guess who slept through math that week?
Geometry,
apparently?
yes.
So, yeah, she recovers this rhombus, and, this is where we get to see that delicious image of Julia's skin suit just kind of hanging around on the ground.
Love it, love it, love it, love it.
Flapping in the wind.
Yeah. So Tiffany ends up getting caught in Leviathan's light, and this is where we get the confirmation that, yes, Chenard basically murdered her mother so that she could get here. So that's the end of her backstory. He starts to approach Tiffany, and this is where Julia suddenly reappears, but we have done a really good, very subtle makeup job that she looks not quite right.
She looks bruised. Like, they painted bruises all over her.
Yeah. So she has to kiss Chenard to distract him while Tiffany solves the puzzle to get it back into its square form. And you pretty much know what's going on at this point. Like, it's not a big surprise when it's revealed to be Kirsty, but it almost makes it more disgusting that she's not just wearing the skin suit, but having to kiss Dickhead.
Okay. Question. All right, so I'll move us forward a little bit, but so Tiffany falls off this ledge and she's hanging off the edge. Julia, actually, Kirsty, walks up to her and just goes, "Trust me." And I was like, why aren't you saying, "Hey, it's me, Kirsty"?
Or anything other than "trust me"?
Trust me.
I mean, it's basically the what lies beneath principle, right?
I know!
Hey, ghost bitch, why can't you just spell it out?
Do you know? What the fuck do I know, Ghost?
Trust me. Trust what?
What? Yeah, you're a bitch. You're an evil cunt from hell.
Also, like, can we backtrack shortly to how, like, within the framing of the Chenard Cenobite kind of being like the ultimate joke on him by making him an idiot? Even
he kills
his death,
himself.
He kills himself. He killed because he just, like, and kills himself with, like, we have seen several times that he can actually shoot these tentacles out of his hands and he's not attached to them. Somehow he manages to shoot out 2 tentacles that he can't detach himself from. And he winds up getting half of his head ripped off. Like, he is a dunce. And it's just like,
I was so confused by his death. I was like, wait a minute. Although the partial decapitation, because I think it rips him off at the mouth.
Yeah, no, it's so
good. It looks real good.
It looks so good. Yeah.
Oh, it looks so good. But yeah, this death is the equivalent to trying to force a shit so bad that you have an aneurysm and die in the toilet.
or like this is the gory, like he slipped on a banana peel and broke his neck. Like, he is just, and I'm loving this more and more within the context of looking at his Cenobite like iteration as they're making him into a practical joke.
Yeah. This is saving it for me.
Yeah, no, it definitely is for me. It makes it like, I think I'm adding like a half of a grade point to this movie, just because of like, oh no, the Chenard Cenobite is a big dingus because Leviathan thinks he's a joke.
Right. Ugh. God, what a dumbass fucking character. But yeah, if you read him this way, this death is incredibly satisfying then.
I mean, it's pretty satisfying anyway. I like seeing this fucker get his head ripped off partially.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. And you were not joking. The FX work on this is so delicious. And the body just, falls off the edge and we're done with him.
And the squelch when the head gets torn off, like the half head, it's perfect.
So good. Yeah. Okay, so Tiffany ends up trusting Kirsty. We peel off the Julia suit. She's covered in viscera. It's real nasty. And then we have to book it because, oops, we've solved the lament configuration, which means the door to hell is closing, which means we need to escape. And they hustle back just in time. So it is kind of a 1-to-1 for how Kirsty got away from the thing in the hallway in the first film.
Movie. But that wasn't in the climax. This is which I guess you could argue makes it weaker because we're just repeating a non-climax scene from the first movie as the climax for this movie. But I'm kind of a sucker for, oh my god, the door's closing. Get there.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It works. It's not as exciting as you maybe had hoped, considering some of the other interesting half climaxes we've gotten, but it's fine.
Yeah.
So we get some quick closing shots that basically confirms everybody at the Chernarda Institute totally fucking died because we just have empty beds with wreaths on them.
Wait, no. I thought these were the mental patients that Chernard, because I guess all the patients died, not the doctors. Sorry, never mind. Ignore me.
Yeah, I think everybody who worked there was fine because they just left. I mean, we never even saw the other doctors that worked here.
It was just Chernard.
It was just Chernard,
Actually, this time around, I did notice that, like, when they're running back in to go back into hell and they're going through the hospital, a lot of the medical staff is getting attacked by the patients.
Oh, by the patients, yeah, because they've kind of been let loose.
Yeah. And they're just, like, jumping on their backs and just, like, wailing on their heads and stuff like that. It's a depiction of mental illness. It is not a good depiction of mental illness.
Not particularly sensitive or nuanced. No. So all this to say, the hospital is empty. We've achieved a certain kind of quiet, and Tiffany and Kirsty walk away, and you think, cool, that's the end of the movie. Fuck you for doing Julia dirty, but okay. And then we cut back to Chernard's apartment, and we see Moving Man number 2 from the first film, once again played by Oliver Parker. So this is the dude
it really the same actor?
Yep.
Except this time he's paired with George Lucas, apparently, judging by the looks of him.
This guy is hilarious, yeah. So they are looking at boxes because, of course, Chernard's apartment has been packed up. But we also discover, hey, there's a bloody mattress. And yeah, this moving guy just gets sucked right into it. And in his place does not come arms, does not come a Cenobite. Instead, we get a rotating pillar that features the faces of Pinhead, skinless Julia, as well as the derelict character played by Frank Baker from the first film, who ends Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, by asking, "What's your pleasure, sir?"
And if you want to know what that pillar has to do with anything, go watch Hellraiser 3.
This is a perplexing decision on which to end this film. It's a striking visual, but it doesn't make a lick of sense.
No, it does not.
No, this has the end ? Written all over it.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. How do we turn this film into a franchise without committing to anything?
Well, it would be several years before we would get another movie in this franchise.
Boo. But yeah, that's Hellraiser 2.
I mean, I'm going to just come in with my final thoughts on this. This is a 5-star horror film for me.
Okay.
I almost hated rewatching it this time because I did notice its flaws a lot more. But in terms of entertainment, well, maybe that's a weird thing to say, but entertainment value, rewatchability, I love bathing in this film. I think this is so fun. It's in terms of horror sequels that like do the original justice. I think this is up there with something along the lines of Scream 2 or What? What's
2?
another second movie? Either way.
House 2.
Psycho 2. Psycho 2. Psycho 2 is a really good
Oh,
movie,
there
too.
we go. I was just making a joke,
I all of the flaws that we've all pointed out, I'm in agreement with. I wish we had gotten the intended third film with Julia as the big bad, but I love the scope this one takes. I love the vibe of it. It is an improvement on a technical level, which is really hard to do because that first one is already like technically masterful. Yeah, I love this movie. I fucking love it.
Like I said, I have been up and down on this. Like, it's never been anything where I've not liked it, but it's like, I don't think it's ever going to be quite on the same level for me as the first one. Mm-hmm. But I also can't ignore the fact that there are elements of it that make the first one better. Right. And so I think, based on that, and like some of the things that for me are improved now that we're looking at like dopey jester Chenard as kind of like a deliberate decision, I'm going to go with 4.5 out of 5. This is a damn fine movie. It is not quite at the level of the original, but it is such a good compliment.
Well, and I think a part of that though is because this is not as simple of a narrative as that first movie, right?
Right. Yeah, it's a messy bitch.
And it's opening itself up by expanding things and trying to get more into the mythos. You open yourself up for more nitpicking, which I think is a lot of what I'm doing. It's just nitpicking. Yeah. But because the first one is so simple and because it executes that simplicity so well, it just doesn't have as many possible like flaws to overanalyze or opportunities for flaws.
Absolutely agree. But it's like, honestly, like, Joe, your arguments about Bloodline, where it's like, oh, but it's so ambitious to a fault, but it's ambitious, and I respect that. This movie, I think, is very, very ambitious. And it does have problems, but it's not as fucked as Bloodline is.
Yes. Yeah. And for me, I mean, that first film is flawless. It is literally my favorite horror film of all time. So nothing can compare to it. But you're right, Trace. You know, this is not just ambitious. It is expanding the mythology, taking it in really different directions, big swings. The gore, if that's what attracted you, the interesting Cenobites, like it's all there. So this feels like a really, really strong sequel because it does understand a lot of what made that first film so successful, including recognizing, hey, we should give Julia a bigger role to play. Do they fumble it at the end? Sure. Is Chenard not my favorite movie villain in the franchise? Also sure. But yeah, kind of like you said, Brian, this conversation is maybe helping me to come a bit more on board. If anything, what this movie does is make me wish we could see what that third film would have looked like, because this does feel like the stepping stone to something that would have capped off a 3-film trilogy in a really interesting, satisfying note. And I'm just, every time I watch this movie, I'm just a little crushed that I don't get to see more of my ultimate favorite female villain.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And again, I don't disagree with anything either one of y'all are saying about this movie, but it's a blast.
Yeah, it's a blast. And I'm going to say one final thing. I feel like we haven't given Tony Randel enough credit for directing this film. It's a lot of fun to watch. There's some really visually dynamic sequences. If you like this and you like the wackadoodle shit, folks probably know that I'm making my way through the entirety of the Amityville franchise, in quotation marks. He does direct Amityville 1992. It's About Time, which is about a clock. It's the clock one. It is probably the best, if not the second best of that franchise. And it has a lot of the same what the fuck is going on, wild special effects in it. Like, I cannot recommend that movie enough, to the point that, Trace, I'm going to make us cover it
That's
someday.
fine. No, trust me, I've been wanting to watch the clock movie because, again, it's about time, but it's about a clock, so it's literally about time.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Do you think it's legitimately a good movie, or is it just a really entertaining movie that you like?
The latter, but so much of it feels like a big swing for a film that didn't need to go that hard. And also, it seems to implicitly understand what makes an Amityville film interesting, whereas so many of them just go, oh, it's the house with the cat eye windows and like bullshit. This is like, no, you're here for like incest and weird gore, right? Because that's what we're gonna give you.
Fuck yes. All right, slap it on the poster. All right, everyone. Well, that has been Hellbound Hellraiser 2. A hell of a way to kick off the year of our Lord 2024.
Woo.
Bryan, as the guest of honor, let everyone know, where can they find you on social media?
You can get me at Blue Sky or on Instagram at Evil Taylor Hicks.
And before we announce what we're covering next week, everyone, if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at HorrorQueers. Shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered. Go to our YouTube channel to check out our catalog of interviews with various horror filmmakers, our Chucky reviews, our anticipated horror films for every month. It's a real blast over there, everyone. If you want to chat with other listeners, please join our Facebook Horror Queers group. If you have a moment, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you want even more content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. If you subscribe today, you will get 281 hours of Patreon content, including this month's new episodes on the pilot episode of Hannibal, the Bryan Fuller television series, Mimic, Founders Day, Night Swim, and our audio commentary for the month will be on Jennifer Kent's The Babadook for its 10th anniversary. But Joe,
yes,
we have an exciting movie to talk about next week. What are we discussing?
All right, so we're going to check out an underseen gem, Trace. We're technically going to New York City, but this is a German film, and it's a campy little masterpiece called Killer Condom.
Oh my god. Everyone, so we covered this in the very early days of our Horror Quiz editorials, and unfortunately, this movie is not available to stream anywhere, although you can get a really nice 4K Blu-ray combo from Vinegar Syndrome, or allegedly, if you go to YouTube and you type in Killer Condom full movie, allegedly a bootleg VHS copy of it will allegedly pop up for you there. Allegedly.
Right. Allegedly. So if you really want to know, if you want to watch the movie beforehand, either buy that Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray or you should allegedly do that on YouTube. Right.
But until next time, we can cross out Hellbound Hellraiser 2.
Indeed. And cross out Horror Queers. Allegedly.
Atlas Avenue, a long stretch of road that encompasses everything the city of Kennett Heights has to offer. Neon lights, traffic, crime, the hustle and bustle of everyday life, and the craziest of characters. My office was above it all. My name is James Locke, and I'm a PI.
Hello, Mr. J. How the hell you doing today?
Good, Edith. Nearly every year I have a new case. New people to meet, new clues to discover, and new problems to solve. But I do it the old-fashioned way. No technology. Nothing post-1950. Hell, I don't even listen to podcasts, but you should. Atlas Avenue Beat is a spoof of the film noir genre with goofy characters, tons of wordplay, and non-stop raunchy humor. There's also 3 whole seasons out right now with more on the way. Just search for Atlas Avenue Beat wherever you listen to podcasts or visit us online at bloody.fm.